Chapter 144 of Varney the Vampyre, Volume 3. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org.
Varney the Vampyre, Volume 3, by Peckett PREST.
Chapter 144, The Star Hotel and the Stranger's Arrival. A remarkable countenance. The illness and death of the stranger. A strange request complied with. Some days previous to the scene related in the previous chapter, the London coach drove up opposite to the Star Hotel, and, as usual, out came a couple of waiters to see what there was from the metropolis in the shape of a passenger who might become an inmate of the hotel, and a customer, of course. "Now then, Billy," said the guard, a stout, good-humored fellow, to a very stiff and punctilious waiter, dressed in black, with a white neckerchief. "My good friend, my name is William. If you must be familiar, though I am sure I don't number you among my acquaintances." "Very good, Billy. I declare you are one of the politest waiters that is to be found between Portsmouth and London. And more than that, you are the politest. Didn't you say you were educated among a lot of gals, or young ladies, I mean?" "I never held any discourse relative to my early days with you, my friend. I am not, just this moment, aware of it." "Ah, I see you are too polite to pass an east wind without taking your hat off to it. How do they when they have none?" "Have you anybody for us?" said William mildly. "Yes, my pink, I have." "Who is he, and where is he? I must not waste my master's time. It is an impropriety I am especially anxious to avoid." "You needn't be in a hurry, nevertheless, especially as I see he is fumbling about for small change. But what will you say if I introduce a customer to you, a good 6 foot high, and perhaps a little to spare, and the color of a well-scraped horseradish, eh? What do you say to that, my Primrose?" William did not know what to say, but after a moment's hesitation, he said, "We don't charge our customers by the room they take, or by their personal appearance. A gentleman is a gentleman, Mr. Guard, all the same whether he have a red face or a white one." "Well, that's good, Billy, but the chief thing is, after all, of what color his money, and how he parts with it, eh?" The guard winked, and William's impassive features were lit up with a spark of intelligence and vivacity, which, however, was only transient, and he relapsed into his old state of extreme and unimpeachable gentility. "Hold your tongue, Billy, here he comes." At that moment the gentleman pulled down the window, and said to the guard, "Open the door, if you please. I shall get out here." "Yes, sir," said the guard, who immediately obeyed the injunction, and a tall but awfully pale individual descended the steps, wrapped up in a huge cloak, so that but little of his person was seen, or features either. What little there was visible was not prepossessing by any means by the color. "This is the Star?" said the stranger, inquiringly. "Yes," said the guard. "I'll stop here. Are you the waiter?" said he, addressing William. "I am, sir," said William. "Will you walk this way, sir?" "Yes. Show me into a private apartment. Let me have a good fire, for I am exceedingly cold." William immediately took him into a room where there was a fire, saying, "If you please, remain here, sir. We will make you a fire, and warm the room, and as you are cold, perhaps you will prefer this to going into a room without a fire there already lighted for your reception." "Certainly, I much prefer it." "Would you like to take any refreshments, sir?" inquired William. "Not now," replied the stranger, in mild accents. William left the room, muttering to himself, "Well, he deserves to be a prince. He is as mild and gentlemanly as a prince. I vow I never heard anyone speak in such a tone, and with so much amiable condescension. What a pity he is so white, at least, that he is so. I only infer from the nose, and part of the forehead, and cheeks around the eyes, these being the only parts that I have noticed. He is, indeed, not much unlike, in colour, to the guard's vulgar simile, a well-scraped horseradish. I never saw white so opaque and dead before. While these thoughts passed through the mind of William, he saw the apartment was placed in readiness for the stranger's reception, and placed himself in communication with the proprietor, and obtained his orders, and then returned to the stranger, and conducted him to his proper apartment, and then awaited his commands. The stranger gave him some orders, which were at once executed, and then he said, "I shall sleep here, of course." "Yes, sir," said William. "I am very particular about my beds. I must have my bed well and thoroughly aired." "Oh, yes, sir," said William. "We always—" Never mind all that," said the stranger blandly. "Never mind all that. I know what you would say. All your beds are always aired. Well, be it so. I have no desire to dispute it. But I once slept in a damp bed. I felt ill, and have never entirely recovered from it." "Oh, that makes him look so horrible pale," thought William. "So you perceive, my friend, that I have cause to be particular, and therefore you will excuse me when I inquire minutely into the character of the beds." "Oh, certainly, sir. Certainly, sir." "Then you will see that my bed is aired, will you not?" "Yes, sir. I will take care that it is especially aired, and if you approve my doing so, sir, I will have a fire lit in your bedroom." "If you please. If you will do all this, you will greatly oblige me. Are there any females in the family?" Yes, sir, the servants," said William, fearing some impropriety was meant. "Oh, the servants, and no others?" "None," said William, quite suddenly. "Oh, yes, that is right. None but the servants. Then my requests will not put you at any serious inconvenience?" "Not in the least, sir," said William, pleased to find that the females had only been inquired about for fear of annoying them. The stranger sat up in his room, and appeared to be very ill, and ate and drank but little. Though he ordered whatever was requisite for a liberal individual, and though taken away untouched, yet it was clearly understood he would have to pay for it. The bed was used and approved of, and the tall, remarkable-looking stranger expressed himself satisfied to the proprietor of the hotel, who came to inquire if he should desire anything more or different from what was already done. This was at once answered in the negative, and the proprietor retreated, by no means prepossessed in the stranger's personal appearance, which was remarkable to a degree that was noticed by everyone in the hotel. "Winchester is an old town, a city, sir," said the proprietor, by way of entering into a conversation with his guest. "Yes, very old," said the guest. "And the cathedral, sir, has been built in part ever since the Saxon times, and then increased by the Normans." "Ay, it is very beautiful. One could wish to lie there, it is so calm and beautiful," said the stranger, with a shudder, which he endeavored to suppress, and then he added, "The graveyard is quiet and retired." "Yes, sir. You have been at Winchester before?" "I have," replied the stranger. Finding any further attempt at conversation likely to appear intrusive, the landlord quitted the apartment with a bow, which was condescendingly returned by the guest, who folded his hands one over the other and turned towards the fire, upon which he gazed thoughtfully for some time in silence. The strange and ghastly-looking countenance of the stranger had created quite a sensation among the individuals at the hotel, all of them declaring they never heard of or saw anything equal to it in all their lives. But what was it? How did it happen so? They had seen dead men, but they had never seen any so ghastly and so fearfully pale. "He doesn't seem long for this world," said one of them. "If you had said he didn't belong to this world," said another, "I should have been inclined to believe you." "He does look like a corpse," added an old woman. "Yes, and what a tooth he has projecting out in front. Upon my word, I have never saw his like." "And I," said another, "never beheld such eyes. Why, he is scarcely human. Such eyes as those I scarcely wish to look at again." "He always appears to me to be in some dreadful agony," said the cook. "He really looks as if he had a perpetual pain in his stomach and had eaten something that had disgraced with him." There was some truth in this last assertion, for the stranger always did appear as if suffering from some internal pain, mental or physical, or both. And it was soon seen that he was rapidly losing strength and could scarcely walk abroad. The cause of all this none could tell. Possibly it was only a sudden illness, or perhaps it was a long affliction to which he was used to, and hence the terrible expression upon his countenance, which appeared as if it had never been otherwise, so deep and so settled was the expression of pain. The stranger appeared anxious to get out, but was unable to do so. He could just walk across the room several times in the day, but was unable to get downstairs, and whenever he attempted to do so, he sunk down, his limbs losing the power of sustaining his weight. "I can go no further," he muttered to himself, as he endeavored to walk down the stairs. "I am lost." As he spoke, a truly horrible expression came across his countenance that made William, who came to his aid, step back, terrified. You are ill, sir," he said, in somewhat uncertain accents. "I am ill," he replied, "very ill." "Will you allow me to help you up, sir, to your room?" "If you please," said the stranger, who was endeavoring to rise by the aid of the banisters, and by these, and with William's assistance, he got up, and then, with some difficulty, he reached upstairs, his own bedroom. "I will send master immediately, sir." "You need not be in any hurry," said the stranger. "I do not desire his presence." However, William left the stranger to seek his master, and when he found him, he said, "Oh, sir, the strange-looking gentleman in number 5 is very ill." "Is he, William? What is the matter with him?" "I am sure I don't know, sir. He sank down the stairs just now, and could only get up to his room again by my help. Something serious, I think, then. I thought he appeared ill when I first saw him, from the expression of his countenance." "Yes, sir, 'tis very strange." "Very," said the landlord thoughtfully. "I'll go and see him, but in the meantime you had better send for Dr. Linton, who knows me and will come at once." "Yes, sir," said William. The landlord immediately sought the stranger's apartment, which he entered without any ceremony, and advanced to the bed in which the stranger lay, and upon his first glance at the occupant, the landlord stepped back in a fright, so truly terrible did the countenance of the stranger appear. "Ah," said the stranger, as he turned his glassy eyes upon him. I have come to see you," stammered the landlord. "I have come to see you. My servant informed me you were ill." "I am very ill. I feared so, and I have sent for Dr. Linton, who will be here immediately." "It is of no consequence, I believe. I am too far gone to recover." Another horrible spasm passed across his countenance. "What does your illness arise from?" "Decay of the system. I want renovating," said the stranger. The landlord paused. He didn't understand this at all, for the stranger did not bear the appearance of decay about him. He was tall and seemingly of middle age, he thought, and nothing about him to savor of decay, save, indeed, the terrible and remarkable paleness which his flesh appeared to bear, and his system generally, in other respects, bore nothing of the appearance of the general decay. "Shall I send for any one, sir? Have you any friends I could write to for you?" "None, sir, thank you," replied the stranger, who, however, bated nothing of his politeness, even in his present position. "Have you any desire to see anyone in particular?" "No one, I thank you." At that moment Dr. Linton was announced, and the proprietor, having introduced him, left the apartment, leaving the doctor and his patient together. The former at once perceived and wondered at his extraordinary paleness. After a few preliminary questions, he appeared quite puzzled, and said to him, "May I inquire what is the cause of this extraordinary complexion?" "Certainly," said the stranger. "It was caused by damp beds." "Damp beds," muttered the doctor, amazed, and hardly comprehending what was said, or the nature of the reply. He was at a loss, but did not say so. What was the connection between cause and effect? "Yes, damp beds," said the stranger. "Have you ever suffered in this way before?" inquired the surgeon. "Yes, more than once." "And have you ever recovered?" said the doctor abstractedly. "I am here," said the stranger mildly. "Truly you are," said the surgeon. I had almost forgotten that. Your case is so singular. Your pulse is very low and irregular. It is, coolly replied the stranger, but immediately a kind of spasm shot across him, as he had before exhibited to the landlord. Do you feel much pain? Does it happen often? No, only occasionally. I don't think you are at all likely to benefit me, sir, said the stranger, with much more courtesy in his manner. I do not mean any disrespect to you, but my complaint is a fatal one in our family. Are you all afflicted in this manner? Yes, all before me died, replied the stranger. And when it does come on, we have no means of avoiding the end that approaches. There is no medical aid that can be rendered, ever did us any good. You are quite an exception to nature, said the medical man. Quite an exception. Your case cannot be beyond the assistance of medicine, if not cure, to ameliorate, though its nature may not be ascertained. But if we could do so, we could tell you what we might be able to do. That has been attempted before, said the stranger mildly, and hence it is I am loath to give you needless trouble. Well, I will call upon you, and see you again. But you ought to take some medicine. I am persuaded that it is some great and extraordinary derangement of the system, a complete sinking of the whole system. Most undoubtedly it is a sinking of the whole system, a sinking which has never yet been stopped by human aid. But you can pursue what course you may deem proper. Will you take medicines if I send any? Yes, replied the patient. I will take them when you choose to send them. I will endeavor to send you something that shall infuse something like vitality into the system. That will help you to rally. That will indeed be doing something more than was ever yet done by any one who attended any individual of our family. I feel I am very weak, and am sinking fast, and do not expect that I shall again have the honor of seeing you. As he again spoke, the same spasm seized upon him. His frame was convulsed for more than a minute, and his pallid features appeared to give forth expressions which it was impossible to describe. The doctor paused, and gazed with something like fear and awe upon him. He had never before seen such a case so destitute of facts, nor yet such a man. It was quite beyond his experience. There was nothing like it in all his previous experience. There was no apparent cause for all that he saw. It might be some severe chronic disorder which did not manifest itself outwardly. If this were the case, it was most extraordinary. But more extraordinary than all was, apart from the medical question, the strange and terrible appearance of the stranger. His paleness, the terrible expression of his features, the strange and even revolting cast of his eyes, that completely baffled all his attempts to understand them, or to remember anything he had ever heard of or seen. The stranger languidly turned in his bed, and then closed his eyes, leaving his medical attendant to his reflections. Well, muttered Dr. Litton, as he looked at his incomprehensible patient, I never met with so fearful a human puzzle before. I never saw such an expression of countenance in all my life, nor did ever I meet with such a case. Had he been one of the fabled monsters of old, the creation of the German mind, he could not have been more unlike a human being to wear a human form. As he spoke, he quitted the room, and made his way to the proprietor of the hotel, who was as anxiously waiting to see him as he was to meet him. Well, doctor, what do you think of the patient? Why, I don't know what to think. I never saw such a man before in all my life. I cannot make him out. Nor I. I can't understand what he means, or what he is, nor anybody else. But he is quite a gentleman. And yet there is something very frightful to be seen in him. I don't know why it is. I don't care about going oftener to him than I am obliged. I don't doubt it. There was something in the feel of his hand more of a corpse than anything I ever felt before. Indeed, it is a queer affair. Do you know him? No, I do not, replied the proprietor. He has not been here more than 2 days, and when he entered he had that deadly paleness which he has now. Did he indeed? It is, I dare say, natural to him, though it must create an unpleasant sensation, go where he would. He must feel it to be so, no doubt, but at the same time he could not avoid it. Have you come to any conclusion respecting his complaint? If not, indeed. I will send him some medicine, though, to tell you the truth, I can hardly tell you what is the matter with him. His disorders seem to consist of a rapid sinking of the whole system, accompanied by a few minor symptoms, and a spasm, which must be very painful, for it produces an extraordinary effect upon his visage, and his eyes glisten like a piece of tin. That's it, doctor. Do you know, I have been thinking for something to which I could liken those eyes to, but could not do it. When do you see him again? Tomorrow sometime. In the meantime, I must bid you good day, for my presence is wanted in the Dundrum family. Oh, have you any of them for a patient? Yes, two. Good day. Good day. Good day, doctor, said the proprietor of the hotel, as he bowed the doctor out, and then, returning to his own apartment, he wondered, in his own mind, at all that had been said by the learned individual when William entered his room with a hastiness of manner quite unusual to him. What is the matter, William? Oh, sir, I beg your pardon, but the strange gentleman— well? What? Why, he's dying, and he wants to see you, sir. To see me, William, and dying? Yes, sir. It's very sudden, but good Lord, how dreadful he looks! He clasped his hands and shook. It made the bed shake, and the windows rattle, just as if an earthquake were taking place. Goodness me, muttered the proprietor, who immediately quitted the apartment, and followed William to that of the stranger, who lay in the same attitude as that described by William, but he was evidently endeavoring to repress all nervous emotion, and by the time he was spoken to, he succeeded in this endeavor completely, and lay apparently calm and collected for the landlord's appearance. "I believe you sent for me," said that worthy in a subdued tone. "Yes, I wish to speak a word to you before I die." "Die!" said the landlord with a start. "No, no, you cannot mean that. You will get better. You are deceived." "No, no. Do not endeavor to persuade me from believing what I know is truth. I shall die, and that, too, before many hours." "If the case is so urgent, let me send to Mr. Linton. He cannot have gone far, and he will return." "Nay, do not do that. His aid is utterly useless. Utterly. He is a clever man, but still. If your own feelings tell you that you can't live, allow me to send for a clergyman." "My friend," said the stranger, "I have settled all that in my own mind. My affairs are all made up, my account is cast, and I shall learn the balance where I am going to. I wish, while I have breath, to beg a favor of you." "Anything on earth that I can do, I will," said the landlord. "Nay, I do not decline all that. I only want you to promise me you'll attend my funeral." "All shall be done as you desire." "My breath, I feel it going. I have money enough about me. You will find my pocketbook and purse, a certain sum." "Yes, sir, yes." "And with that you will have the goodness to liquidate my debt to yourself, my funeral expenses, and place the residue of that sum about my person." "When you are dead!" exclaimed the landlord. "Yes, will you promise me? Will you swear to see it done?" "Yes, I will. I do swear." "See you keep the oath. My breath is going fast. My strength is leaving me, and I will do all," said the landlord again. "Will you have any friend attend your funeral obsequies?" "It's melancholy, but I am obliged to speak of it to you, because I cannot otherwise know your wishes." "Do not mind that," said the stranger, turning towards the landlord. "But when I am dead, dress me in my clothes, just as if I were about to walk. Let me have all my property and my money, such of it as remains after paying all charges. The remainder cause to be placed about my person. In fact, all that belongs to me, and place me. Where would you be buried?" said the landlord. "Place me," gasped the dying man. "Place me in the— A gurgling noise, succeeded by a sharp rattle in the throat, was all the sound that escaped him, while his glazed eyes were fixed with a truly horrifying expression upon the features of the landlord, whose presence of mind appeared to forsake him. And he exclaimed, falling on his knees, affright, "Lord, have mercy on us! What a dreadful affair!" "Horrible, sir," said William. "Oh, are you here, William?" inquired the landlord. "Yes, sir," replied that individual. "Oh, I'm glad of that. Did you see him die?" "I did, sir." "How dreadful." "Very, but I am glad you were here, because he has made some singular requests about burying him, and in a certain manner, with all his clothes on, and his jewels and money about him. Now I should be considered foolish if I did anything of the kind, but I have promised. As he has no friends, I will do what I have promised." "It is very good of you, sir, though I think he has been very silly in making such a request." "You cannot be so considered for performing the wish of a dying man. It is the duty of any one so promising to perform it." "Quite right, William, quite right. But did you understand what he meant by his last words? I mean, where he wished to be buried?" "I don't know positively, but I think he meant the cathedral. I thought so, at least. I am not sure he said so, but I believe he meant to do so." "Well, I think so myself, and in the cathedral he shall be buried. But it is a terrible-looking corpse. I could not sleep in the same room with him, poor fellow. What he'll come to at last there is no telling." "Yes, sir, he does look dreadful." "You needn't tell anybody we have a dead customer in the hotel, William." "No, sir." "Because people might be curious and wish to see him, and if they were to do so, I'm sure they would leave the house." "So they would, sir." "He's a dreadful-looking corpse. I never heard of such a one. What can be the cause of it? And to be buried in his clothes, too? And his money and his jewels, that is very strange." "Very strange, sir, indeed. And the fewer persons who know of it, the better, else the body will not lie very long in its grave. There will be those who would not mind turning resurrection men for the value of what he had about him." "So there would be, William, and now I think of it, the authorities of the cathedral shall know nothing about it, for who can tell what fancy they may take concerning it being an unchristian burial?" "And yet, sir, he paid all of his debts like a Christian." "Yes, and left a remembrance for the waiter. There could not be a more Christian act than that, for who could be more Christian-like than to remember the waiter?" And William at once admitted the truth of the assertion, and they both left the room, and instructions were given to William to obtain the proper aid respecting the funeral, and an order was given to the undertaker to come and measure the corpse for its last garment. All these things were duly attended to and kept secret, so that a very few persons were aware of the fact that so strange an occurrence had taken place in the good city of Winchester. Much less were they acquainted with the precise locality of the very house in which the occurrence took place. When the morning arrived on which the funeral was to take place, some persons were surprised to behold a couple of mutes standing side by side at the door of the Star Hotel, and there had been no previous sign of mourning. The hearse and one mourning coach, however, was all that attended, into which one solitary mourner entered. There were several others made up for the occasion to give the cavalcade an uniform appearance. The body was carried down by 8 men. It was very heavy, and the men bent beneath the load they bore, and when it was placed in the hearse, the one mourner got in, and they proceeded towards the cathedral, which was quite close at hand. A few, very few minutes served to bring them to the goal, and before the entrance of the cathedral they stopped, and out came the undertakers, who contrived, with much exertion, to carry the body into the church, and then, after some preliminary ceremonies, it was conducted into the vaults, where it was deposited, and the burial service was said over it most duly and solemnly, and then left, it was presumed, safe and secure to abide its final doom at the day of judgment. But many thoughts prove but the shadow of our wishes, and this seemed to be as a mocking shadow, as our readers are aware by this time of what actually took place in the dead of the night. "In what name was the deceased registered? The burial, I mean?" inquired the clergyman, whose memory, like some of his other faculties, was obscured by age. "His name was Francis Varney," replied the chief mourner, "who was no other than the proprietor of the Star Hotel." End of chapter 144.
Chapter 145 of Varney the Vampire, Volume 3. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Shane Nolan. Varney the Vampire, Volume 3, by Peckett PREST. Chapter 145. A rural scene by moonlight, the storm, an accident on the road, a new and strange acquaintance acquired, a disappointment. It was one of those pleasant, moonlit evenings that are frequently felt, as well as seen, towards the end of August, that a party of individuals sat in a traveling carriage, and were proceeding at an easy pace on one of the crossroads that run from Winchester to Bath, and also from Southampton, the Isle of Wight, between Salisbury, more properly speaking, and Bath. The evening was lovely. The day had been sultry, and the sun had not been gone down so long but that the heat of its rays yet remained. Indeed, though the moonlight gave light, yet the radiated heat from the earth first received from the sun was so great that the light evening breeze barely tempered the air. The party thus proceeding had been spending a few weeks in rambling about Southampton, Portsmouth, and Salisbury, and were now wending their way to the city of Bath. They consisted of but 4 individuals: Captain Fraser, his wife, her sister, and younger brother. The latter did not count more than 12 years, while the sister, Miss Stevens, was just 17 years of age. Captain Fraser had scarce been married 6 months, and was upon one of the early matrimonial jaunts which often take place in the earlier part of the married life, when all is sunshine, and the matrimonial barometer might have always have the index nailed to "set fair" at such periods. The lady's sister and brother were residing with her, for their parents were dead, and hence they, the captain and his lady, were their natural protectors. They were riding in an open carriage. They had parted and thrown back, and even in this manner they felt the evening air was scarcely, though riding, cool. "I don't think," said Mrs. Fraser to her husband, "that ever I beheld so beautiful a scene. The time, the warmth of the air, the occasional delicious feel of the light evening breeze, the serene light of the moon. Altogether, I never felt so comfortable, or, may I add, so happy as I do at this moment." "I'm glad to hear you say so," said the captain. "It gives me an additional pleasure to find I can please you." "Now, Fraser, that is too bad of you." "What is too bad, my dear?" said the captain inquiringly. "Why, to say you are glad you can please. That is as bad as to say it is a very difficult matter, and you know I am very easily pleased, especially when you make the attempt," said Mrs. Fraser. "Well, we will not quarrel about that, my dear, but I must say with you this hour, time, and place are all one could desire, and such as we seldom meet. The scene across the country is truly beautiful." "Yes," said Miss Stevens, "it is beautiful as far as we can see." "What river is that yonder?" inquired the brother. "That is the Willy, the same that we saw at Salisbury," said Captain Fraser. "Indeed, I thought that came from another direction more northerly." "That was another arm of the same river, and joined this about there, and all the low grounds on this side of yon hills are called the Valley of the Willy, and a beautiful little vale it is, too, fruitful and picturesque. How beautiful the moonbeams glisten on yonder water!" "They do, but not so strongly as they did." "No? What is the reason of that? The air appears to darken. I have noticed it for some minutes past. Why is that?" "I suppose it is caused by the evaporation from the grounds, and heavy dews, to compensate for the want of rain that usually takes place at this time of year." "Then we shall be obliged to shut up the carriage, for the dew is more likely to cause cold than anything else." "It is so, but we are upon comparatively high ground here, and moreover, they will not reach us yet. But Here are shawls you can wrap up if you feel chilly, or you can put on your veils." "It's yet so warm," said Miss Stevens, "that I should be reluctant to put on any more clothing yet awhile." "Do as you please, but do not take cold," said Captain Fraser. "How indistinct the scene becomes around the river, which we just now saw so plain, is quite obscured, and you can scarcely tell where it is, save here and there, where the dotted willows appear, and which mark out the course of the stream." "It is so," said the youth. "I can see the green tops of the trees appear above the thick mist that rises from the river below." "Exactly. That is the fact. And see how it spreads itself over the cornfields and meadows." "Was that not a flash of light?" said Mrs. Fraser suddenly. "Light? I saw no light," said the captain. "Nor did I," said the youth. "Did you, sister?" "No, I did not so, but it is very sultry, and therefore it is very likely just at this time of the year. How much farther have we to travel before we stop for the night?" "I suppose 7 or 8 miles, not more." "There! That was no mistake, however," said Mrs. Fraser, as a flash of light shot across the heavens and left not a trace behind it. "No, there was no mistake about it, nor did I think so before," said Captain Fraser. "Only I have not noticed it, but it is harmless. It is what is called summer lightning, and has none of the ordinary results of lightning." "It will possibly make the air cool," suggested Mrs. Fraser, "and in that case we shall have a more agreeable temperature. To tell the truth, the extreme warmth and dryness of the air gives a strange uneasiness to the body." Another flash. "Ah, that's a change in its character." "Yes, that is the blue forked lightning, and I am much mistaken if we do not have a sudden change. Hark!" At that moment, a sullen and deep rumble was heard in the heavens, followed by another flash, and then such a peal of thunder that boomed and rattled through the air in a manner that startled the dull echoes of the night, and made the welkin resound with the fearful sounds that filled the heavens. "We shall have a fall of rain in another moment," said Captain Fraser. "Push on, drive on, and let us get out of this soon as we can." "Aye, aye, sir," said the driver, and crack went his whip. The horses increased their speed, and they rattled on at good pace. "Had we better not stop and have the hood closed?" "No," said the captain. "I can manage that very well, with the assistance of your brother, and we shall not lose time." Captain Fraser and the young gentleman alluded to brought the coach top up and secured it, just as a heavy shower descended in such torrents that they could scarcely hear themselves speak. So heavily did it rattle upon the leathern covering of the vehicle, and they sat there for some time in silence. Soon, however, the thunder and lightning filled the air with sounds and flashes in a manner that began to create a feeling of alarm in the minds of the ladies, and some uneasiness in the mind of the captain, not upon their account only, but because the cattle might take flight under the circumstances, especially as they were fresh and had now scarcely run 3 or 4 miles, for their stage was a long one before they reached their destination, which was now about 2 days' easy journey. The thunder and lightning appeared to become more and more terrible. The storm, indeed, appeared to increase rather than diminish in intensity. The very center of the storm appeared to be fast approaching, and making the spot on which they stood the pivot on which it turned. Its fury increased, and with it the horses were each moment becoming more and more unmanageable, though in some measure aware of the fact, Captain Fraser kept his place, fearful lest he should alarm his wife and at the same time distract the coachman. Suddenly there was a bright and vivid flash of light, such as they had not seen before, but which illumined the whole place around them, and made everything as visible as if placed in the strongest light imaginable, followed by such a crashing peal of thunder that the living earth appeared to rock again. It wanted but this to make the horses perfectly ungovernable, and they dashed away at a furious speed along the road. "Good heavens! The horses have taken fright," said Mrs. Fraser, as she became aware of the speed they were going at. "They have merely taken fright, my dears," said the captain, unwilling to increase their alarm by informing them of his own. "He will keep them in the middle of the road, and we shall be at our journey's end the sooner, and the more so the better." They were upon the point of being satisfied when the jolts of the carriage, added to its eccentric course from one side of the road to the other, attracted so much of their attention that Mrs. Stevens said, "See, Captain, how the carriage sways from side to side. We shall all be over in a minute or two. We shall all be killed." "There goes the thunder again, worse than your kettle drums," said young Stevens, who appeared to think it rather a joke. "The lightning flashes, too, as if we had got an electrical machine." "Do not talk in that way, Charles, for goodness' sake," exclaimed his younger sister. "We shall all be killed presently." "I hope not," said Captain Fraser, "though I admit it looks serious. But all you can do, and the best under all the circumstances, is to remain calm and quiet and see what happens." "See what happens? Dear me, Captain, what do you think we all are made of that we should sit calm?" said Miss Stevens, "and see what will happen when there may be broken limbs at the least, if not death." "It's the best advice I can give you." "Had we better not get out? I don't mind trying." "Aye, if you wish to run imminent risk of instant and violent death, you will make the attempt. If you remain in here shut up, you have every probability that, if we do have an upset, which is not yet certain, we may all escape with a little fright or at most a few bruises." "Yes, sister, you had better wait for the worst, if the worst must happen, rather than rush into it." This was sensible advice, and the whole party fell into a deep silence, which was unbroken save by the sound of wheels, the rattling of the carriage, the rain, and the roar of thunder, enough to employ their minds, and at the same time keep them in momentary dread of the fearful catastrophe. Suddenly there was a crash and a dreadful jolt. They knew not what had happened, except that they felt the vehicle was turned over. In a moment more the door was opened, and a stranger lent assistance in getting out the unfortunate travelers. "Do not be alarmed, ladies," said a strange but courteous voice. "No further mischief can happen now beyond inconvenience." As the stranger spoke, he lifted the two ladies out of the carriage and placed them in a sheltered position by the body. "Are you hurt?" inquired the stranger, as he assisted Captain Fraser and young Stevens out of the falling carriage. "No, sir, I am not. Thank you for your timely aid. Where are the ladies?" "They are, I hope, uninjured." Captain Fraser immediately ran up to them, and seeing them in safety, said, "I am glad to see you are safe. I was stunned at first by a blow on the side of my head." "Yes, we are safe, but we have to thank this gentleman that we have been so speedily and so easily extracted from our unpleasant prison." "I am much indebted, sir, for your aid to the ladies. May I trespass upon your kindness to lend me a little further assistance?" "I shall be happy to assist you under these unpleasant circumstances, but allow me to suggest as the first thing that the cushions be placed under the hedge for the use of the ladies, and what cloaks or coats you have should be thrown over them." "Right, sir. I thank you." "If you are deficient in them, my cloak is at their service, though I am afraid it is almost saturated." "I have enough here," said Captain Fraser, as he pulled out several articles of that nature, and then he, with the assistance of the stranger, placed them so that Mrs. Fraser and sister were almost, if not entirely, sheltered from the storm. "Now," said the stranger, "the first thing that can be done will be to right the carriage and place it in a position where it will receive no further damage." "But the driver and horses," said Captain Fraser. "I must look after them." "Had we better not look after them? He may be dying." "By no means," said the stranger. "He will do very well if we place the carriage upright. We shall be able to replace the ladies." "We can," said the captain, who appeared to be divided between the duties of humanity and the tender anxiety he felt for his wife. "Exactly," said the stranger, "and permit me to suggest that he has either gone on beyond our aid or does not require it." "It is possible, and very probable," said the stranger. "But if you prefer it and think the ladies will not suffer, we can walk on ahead till we come up with them, if they stop before the end of the stage." "No, no, sir, you are quite right. I will get the carriage up if you can so far assist me. We shall then place the ladies in comparative safety." "We shall so." They immediately walked round the carriage and examined its position, as well as they were able when, to the captain's great relief, he found that it was still on its wheels, though the body was thrown over on its side. "How can it have happened?" inquired the captain. "I cannot well see," replied the stranger, "but you will perceive something must have caught the off-side wheel and turned the whole of the fore carriage that way, which has left this corner of the body without support, added to which the speed of the momentum much have acquired in this course has thrown it over." "Precisely. I see now how it is. But if we get the body up, it will fall again over on this side since it has no support." "Oh, yes, it will remain up since it has lost all force, all moving power, unless, indeed, any of the straps are broken. We can try." "Here, Charles," said Captain Fraser, "we will want your aid." "Oh," said the stranger, "the slightest assistance is valuable. It is the last strain or effort that may complete the removal. Now, if we can lift it up from the side, we shall soon right it, and then the fore carriage can be forced round, the ladies replaced, until we get better dispose of them." The stranger placed his shoulder to the carriage, as well as the captain and his brother-in-law, young Stevens, and thus aided, he soon lifted it up into its old position, and there it remained very quietly. "Now we had better pull all the wheels round." This was done, and the carriage assumed its former state. "Well, how could they have gotten away?" inquired Captain Fraser, examining the axles and the bars. "All appears right." "They have broken the splinter bar, and here are the remains of the traces. The splinter bar, I find, has only lost its hooks, so it will do again. Come, sir, you have less damage to regret than I at first thought possible. You could have escaped with. I am truly glad it is so." "Thank you, sir. Your kindness and assistance has been truly great and efficient. But I have yet to find the poor fellow who drove us." "We will seek after him, or I had better ride on to the next town or house where I can obtain assistance, while you will be better able to protect the ladies by remaining with them, and my horse will carry me quickly enough." "Oh, you are mounted." "I am, but the ladies wait." Thus admonished, the captain turned to the ladies, and with the stranger's assistance, he conducted them back to the carriage, where they were replaced without any material damage or misfortune of any kind, save what might arise from fright. "Someone is coming this way," said the stranger. "If I mistake not, they are your runaways by the sounds." They listened, and distinctly heard the sounds of horses' feet coming along, with the jingling of harness. That made it pretty certain that what the stranger said was correct, and that it was most probable that this was indeed the man who drove them coming back with the same cattle or some fresh. A few moments more decided the speculation, and the man himself rode up and looked at the carriage, saying, "Well, I thought it was upset." "So it was, but we have righted it now. Has no accident happened to you? But these are the same horses." "Yes, sir. When they got loose or broke away, they went as if they were shot out of a gun, and away they went for some miles, until I contrived to stop them, which was a hard job. However, I thought then, as there was nothing the matter with them or me, I'd better return and see what was become of you, sir, and the ladies." "Quite right. Do you think they will go quietly in the harness again?" Oh, yes, sir." "Then we will harness them and go to the end of the next stage. when we can see exactly what mischief, if any, has been done." This was immediately put in practice, and they were soon harnessed, the broken straps and traces being mended in the best way time and circumstances admitted, but effectually enough for the present purpose. "Now, sir," said Captain Fraser, "do you continue on this road or the one we have come? I suppose we must have overtaken you as you were coming this way." "No, I was a traveler going in the same direction. I saw your speed from a distance, and believing your horses to have taken fright, I rode on, and being well mounted, I overtook you just as the accident happened." "Then we may have the pleasure of your company on the road for some distance to come, I hope, sir." "As far as the next place to stop at all events, for I do not desire to travel further than I can avoid tonight." "Then I shall be able to thank you more at leisure, and at a better opportunity than at present," said the captain. "Do not name it. I am too happy to have had it my power to render you any assistance. Shall I ride on and secure your proper accommodation when you do arrive there?" "Your kindness is very great," said the captain again. "I am much beholden to you, but if we can get as far as we hope to, we shall not require it. There will be sufficient for travelers under the ordinary course of events. We shall do very well, and if we should not be able to get so far, we must make our accommodations content with whatever chance accommodation we get on the road." "Then we will journey for that distance in company," said the stranger, as he mounted his horse, which had stood quietly by while the tall stranger rendered the timely assistance he had to them. They proceeded along now at a cautious pace. The weather had abated, and the rain was now less severe. The thunder only heard in the distance, while the lightning could only be seen in occasional flashes in the distance, in a direction away from them. The clouds began to lighten, and then the diffused light of the moon came and shed a gentle light upon the scene, though it was very scarce and of comparative little use, save it enabled them to see their way all the better. The roads were good, and they traveled onwards with some increase of speed, and finding none of their amended horse tackle had given way, they still kept journeying onwards at the same pace. Time brought them to their destination, and when they arrived at the inn at which they were to stop for the night, they found it had not made much more than an hour or an hour and a half's difference. When they were fairly housed, the stranger took an apartment to himself. It was while he sat before the fire that Captain Fraser entered his room. "I must apologize for my intrusion," began the captain. "Don't say a word on that head, sir," said the stranger. "It is no intrusion. You are welcome. Be seated, if you please. I am alone and perfectly at leisure." "I have come to thank you for the service you have done us, and to beg that you sup with us, and permit the ladies to have an opportunity of thanking their preserver in person. You will oblige us all by accepting the invitation." "I am much obliged for your courteous offer," said the stranger, who was a tall, dignified man. "I will come after supper, if you please, and shall feel it a great honor, I assure you. But I am so truly sensible that my efforts were more owing to accident than to anything else, that I do not wish to hear anything more of it." "You must not be so self-denying, sir. We do not wish to put any more merit on your act than we think it deserves, but that much you must accept, if you will permit me to use such a word. Shall we have the pleasure of your company?" "After supper." "I will not press you against your feelings, but you will come after supper, sir. I hope I may have the pleasure of drinking a bottle of wine with you. Will you come?" "I will, sir, and thank you for the honor." "May I have the pleasure of being able to introduce you to the ladies by name?" said the captain with a little hesitation. "Oh, certainly. I beg your pardon. I am somewhat forgetful. I forgot I had not passed through an introduction," said the stranger. "Permit me to give you my card." As he spoke, he handed Captain Fraser a beautifully embossed card upon which was printed in Italian characters, "Sir Francis Varney." Captain Fraser took the card and read the name, and then passing a compliment, he said, that since he could not have his company to supper, then he should expect him when he felt at leisure and disposed to do. I am sorry he will not come, though under other circumstances I should have been glad of it, but I am sorry on this occasion. And why would you have been glad? Because after the flurry and upset we had, I'm hardly fit to see anyone, much less a stranger, but he so kindly and promptly rescued us from our danger that I cannot feel a reluctance at any time. Yes, said her sister, and I must say I never heard a voice that sounded so really like a gentleman's indeed. I could fancy that anyone could speak positively assert that he was a gentleman, only from hearing him speak, without seeing him at all. But be that as it may, I felt convinced he was such. He's very courteous, I must say, said Miss Fraser. And who do you think he is? I have no means of forming any judgment. Well, then, he is Sir Francis Varney. Sir Francis Varney? Well, I do not know the name. I've never heard the name before that time, but I think there is some one of that name in the time of Queen Elizabeth, an attendant on the Earl of Leicester. Are you not joking? Indeed, I am not. I have read so. And do you think this gentleman may be a descendant of his? There is no impossibility nor improbability about it that I see, said Mrs. Fraser, but I am the more obliged to him for his timely assistance. I am sure it was fortunate that he was so close at hand. Yes, it was very fortunate. Mary, my dear, we shall be introduced to a baronet. It was quite a prophecy of yours in saying he was a gentleman, when you only heard him speak. By the way, Fraser, what sort of man is he? Very singular indeed. Singular! Ah, he is very tall. Yes, he is tall, but very pale, more remarkable and dignified than handsome, extremely courteous and polite. What age is he? Well, I cannot tell, perhaps 40, perhaps not so old by 10 years. It is quite impossible to say. Dear me, how strange. I think I could guess anybody's age better than that. You shall have an opportunity of doing so, then, in an hour or so, when he will come, and I think I may venture upon saying you will be pleased with his dignified politeness, and say he is much superior to most men. The supper ended, and the wine was produced, and Captain Fraser, his lady, and 2 young relatives were seated round a good fire, for the storm had chilled the air. Besides, the damp they had stood in rendered such a precaution necessary and pleasant, notwithstanding the day had been sultry, but the change in the temperature was sudden and great, awaiting, with something like impatience, the stranger's arrival. He does not appear to come, said Charles Stevens. He is not here, certainly, but he will come, no doubt, the moment he is quite sure that we had done our supper, and he had finished his own. Perhaps he takes longer than we. Perhaps so, but I am strongly tempted to go to him again. It might be construed into undue urgency or something of the sort, said Mrs. Fraser, and yet he might be waiting for something of the sort. So he might, said the captain. At all events, I will go and see. If he were inclined to do so under other circumstances, he would not take offense under the present. Perhaps not. At that moment the door was opened, and the waiter presented a note. A note for me, said Captain Fraser. Yes, sir. Who can it be from? From the gentleman upstairs, sir, who came with you an hour back. Oh! exclaimed Captain Fraser. He has taken ill and obliged to go to bed, sir. Captain Fraser immediately tore open the note and read as follows. Sir, I deeply regret I cannot keep my promise to take a glass of wine with you, and have the honor of being introduced to the ladies. Favor me so much as to make my excuses to them. It is a great pleasure lost to me on the occasion. Permit me to say deferred rather than lost. And if I might venture to make an appointment under the circumstances, I can only say that, if convenient, I should be happy to breakfast with you, and then have the honor and happiness I have now the misfortune to lose. Sudden and severe indisposition alone have caused me to retire before I have the honor of seeing you and expressing my inability to attend you. Yours obliged, Francis Varney. There was a blank upon the countenances of all present. Evidently a deep disappointment was felt by all, but the captain was especially surprised, and turning to the waiter, he said, "Did you see this gentleman?" "Yes, sir." "Was he unwell?" "Yes, sir." "I mean, was he, or is he, dangerously ill?" "He was very ill, sir, but I don't know that he is dangerously ill. He suffered much pain, and he was obliged to have aid to go upstairs." "Did he say what it was that ailed him?" pursued Captain Fraser. "Not that I heard, though some say he had got the cramp and cold by being too long in the wet." "Perhaps so. Very likely, that will do. Let me know how he is the first thing in the morning, do you hear?" "Yes, sir, I will take care." "Well," said Mrs. Fraser when they were alone, "I did not expect such a disappointment this evening. However, he makes up for it by appointing the breakfast hour for our meeting. It is the more agreeable, as we shall have had a good night's repose, and shall be the better able to appear to advantage." End of chapter 145. Recording by Shane Nolan.
Chapter 146. Varney the Vampyre, Volume 3, by Peckett PREST. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Emily Hoover. Varney the Vampyre, Volume 3, Chapter 146. The Alarm at the Inn, Bedchamber Terrors, A Night Scene, a morning succeeding to a night of adventure. The inmates of the inn are all fast bound in sleep. The senses of all seem steeped in deep forgetfulness. Even the hour of dreams was past. The storm, which had raged so violently in the early part of the evening, and which had appeared to have gone and a calm succeeded, had returned, and the fury of the blast was only equalled by the deluging rain and the fearful rumbling of the thunder. But calmly slept the beautiful and innocent Mary Stevens. She was young, and her mind bore no weight of care. When she slept, no dreams disturbed her rest, but a calm, death-like sleep sat upon her soul, and steeped it in forgetfulness. The storm raged around, but she heard it not. She was unconscious of it. Perhaps the disturbance and fatigues of the previous day caused a greater degree of depth to her insensibility, and rendered her mind less liable to slight interruptions, but she slept soundly, and did not even hear the intruder, who walked across the floor of her bedroom, and stood gazing on her fair arms as she lay sleeping. The intruder was a tall man, enveloped in some strange mantle, all white. He stooped over her, as if he listened to the beating of her heart, while his strangely bright eyes, which shone fearfully, appeared to express a horrible kind of joy, too terrible for human nature to contemplate. He stooped. He placed his hand upon her heart, and felt its pulsations, and a terrible and ghastly smile passed over his features, while a movement of the lips and mouth generally appeared as if anticipatory of a coming meal. Then he took the white arm in his hands, and cast a longing look at the features of the maiden, who appeared disturbed by the rude action, and moved in her sleep, and was suddenly aroused from her slumber by a severe pang in her arm, as though some creature had plunged its fangs into her flesh. She started up, and found herself flung upon the bed with gigantic strength. She screamed, and uttered scream upon scream. The old inn was filled with sounds of terror and pain. There was a loud knocking heard at the door. Then, indeed, the assailant left his prey to provide for his own safety, but it was almost too late, for the door was burst open violently as he made for another means of exit, which was the means by which he had entered the apartment. But he was prevented, and, as the first person entered the apartment, he threw him down by placing something in his way. The light was thrown against some furniture, which immediately rose up into a flame. "Help! Help! Fire! Fire!" These were fearful sounds, such had never before been heard in that place, and the inmates, woke up by the screams from deep slumber, were startled and terrified at these sounds, and springing at once from their beds, echoed the sounds as they run wildly about from place to place. "Where is the fire? What's the matter? Fire in the young lady's room!" All eyes were directed to that quarter, and in another instant there were several persons rushing to the room, the glare of the fire in which at once attracted their observation, and they rushed to the rescue, among the foremost of whom was Sir Francis Varney, whose bedchamber was not far distant from Mary Stevens's. He rushed to the bed, and wrapping the bedclothes round her, he carried her out of the room and the scene of danger, and, as he came out of the room, he inquired, "Where is Captain Fraser?" Here I am, Sir Francis," said the captain, coming hastily forward. "Then, Captain Fraser, I resign my charge up to you. You are her proper protector, but I must apologize for my hasty intrusion into her apartment." "Do not think of speaking in that manner, Sir Francis. We are already indebted to you for our lives, and now we are again your debtor. Your ready aid has twice saved the young lady." Captain Fraser took Miss Stevens from Sir Francis, and then carried her, as she was quite insensible, to his own room to his wife, her sister, where she was laid upon the bed, and found to be quite insensible. There was much confusion in the inn. People were running about from place to place, and tumbling over each other in the confusion of thought, and the moments were precious, for many were running about, yet none did effective service, though all were willing enough to do all that could be done by them under the circumstances. "You had better get some water," said Varney, "as quickly as you can. It is useless to run about and stare at each other. Get all the buckets you can. Be quick about it. There may yet be time enough to save the inn and keep the fire to the room where it is, but that time will soon be at an end." Instantly 2 or 3 of the men ran down and got a plentiful supply of water, and then, under the direction of Sir Francis Varney, the fire was very soon got under, and the flames were extinguished. Then came an inquiry how the fire had first appeared. "Do you know how it happened?" inquired Sir Francis Varney of the innkeeper, who stood quite mute with astonishment at the scene before him. "No, sir," said the innkeeper, "I don't know anything. I don't know myself. I don't even know where I am or what's the matter." "Then I beg to tell you, sir," said Varney, with much suavity of manner, "then I beg to tell you, sir, that there has been a fire in your inn, a young lady frightened out of her senses, and I know not the cause." "No more don't I," said the landlord, with a short grunt, indicative of wonderment and alarm. "I wish I did. I wonder who set the place afire. That's what I wants to know, and why he did it." "The motive was not a bad one, I believe." "Not a bad motive? That which causes one man to set fire to and destroy another man's property?" "Not when it is not only not done with any evil intention, but it was not even done wilfully," said Sir Francis. "Perhaps you saw it done?" said the landlord, with another grunt. "I did," replied Varney. "Hearing the disturbance, I hastily threw on some of my clothes, and ran out of my apartment to ascertain what was the matter, and found several others had got here before me, and had burst open the door. The first who entered had a light in his hand, and fell with it, setting the place on fire, which burned furiously for a minute or more, the hangings being dry and old. I took the young lady out, else I am sure she must have perished." "Well, I saw you come out with her in your arms like a salamander, but what I most wanted to know is, what was it that disturbed my customer? That is of the greatest consequence to me." "You are perfectly right, my friend," said Sir Francis, with much composure, "to make that inquiry, that being the origin of all that subsequently took place. You are a man of discernment, and must see that the young lady herself can alone give us any account of that." "True, sir. But I am much obliged to you for the trouble you have taken, not only for the young lady's sake, but for the property you have prevented being destroyed. You have, no doubt, saved the inn and all it contains." "That is enough, sir," said Varney, waving his hand. "You have said enough. I am glad I have rendered you a service, and that it has been effectual." "It has been just the thing," said the landlord. "Then take my advice. See the place is secure, and send all persons to bed, save, perhaps, a single individual who might be set to watch the room which has been on fire, and which may have some slumbering spark in it, though I think not. But the quieter the place is, the sooner the young lady's alarm will be over, and then all will be well." "Certainly, certainly," said the landlord. "It will be better to do so. But here is the only gentleman who can tell us how the young lady is." Sir Francis Varney turned round, and beheld Captain Fraser coming towards them with a very grave aspect. "Captain Fraser," said Sir Francis, "perhaps you can tell us what we are so very anxious to learn, and what we have been inquiring about." "What may that be, Sir Francis?" "We have been trying to learn what it is that caused the young lady to scream out in such a fearful manner. We have settled the cause of the fire. That has been manifest enough to us all." "Indeed! I am not acquainted with it." "It rose from the first person who entered her apartment after the door was burst open, falling over something, and setting fire to the curtains, which blazed up in an instant, and set the whole room on fire." "Indeed!" said Captain Fraser, almost incredulously. "Yes, I saw that myself," said Varney, "and I stepped over him as he lay on the ground, and therefore know it. But how is the young lady? Has she recovered from the extreme fright into which she has been thrown?" "It is a much more serious affair than I had any notion of, Sir Francis." "I am concerned to hear you say so." "Shall I send for the doctor?" inquired the landlord. "Do. That is what I came to ask you to do. She has recovered once, and has fainted again. I know not what to think. She has a singular wound in her arm. I can't understand that, at all events." "I did not see it when I took hold of her, though, to be sure, what I did was done in smoke and flame, and I could not be supposed to scrutinize very closely had I been so inclined. But what kind of wound is it?" "I can hardly describe it to you, save it is a bite, and there are teeth marks plain enough to be seen, though we have no means of telling what kind of creature it was that inflicted the wounds." "Indeed, I am concerned, for the effect upon the imagination will be very bad. But did she not see, or fancy she saw, the object that injured her?" "It was dark, and the storm raged without. Moreover, she was held down by a powerful grasp, and when she attempted to rise, she was flung down, and she could feel the blunted teeth enter her flesh, and the creature appeared to suck her blood." "Dear me," said Sir Francis, "what a very strange affair! It is fortunate I was obliged to retire early, and I slept the lighter, and was therefore easily aroused from my sleep. But I am proverbially a light sleeper." "Are you, sir? But what has caused the wound in her arm I cannot tell. It is quite a mystery. She has got a fancy into her mind that it was a human being, but that could not have been the fact." "I should imagine not," said Sir Francis. "And then I know of no animal who could commit such an act. A cat or a dog could not have done it, though a dog might have made the teeth marks, but a dog would hardly have attempted to suck blood." "They will do it," said Sir Francis. "That I know to be a fact, and I believe it to be one that is generally admitted by all persons, especially that breed of animals mostly kept, which have something of the bulldog in them." "It may be so, but how could she be held down by one of them? She could not be struck down when she attempted to rise." "It is not for me to combat the young lady's opinions, but remember, my dear sir, how terrified, not to say how horrified, she must have been at such an unusual and, I may add, unheard of an attack. If you consider such things, and the improbability, not to say what appears to me the impossibility, you will see plenty of room for mistakes to arise and give her notions a wrong turn." "That is very true." And besides, I would, if I were convinced of the contrary, endeavor to persuade her of her mistake, unless you can discover the perpetrator of the outrage, when justice demands that such a savage should be severely punished." "By God, Sir Francis," said the captain, "if I could see him, I would shoot the scoundrel. But then I am getting angry without a cause. It may not be what she thinks, and then, you know, all one's anger goes for nothing." "So it does, but in the meantime, great care and attention is requisite to regain her confidence and serenity of mind." "Oh, a day or two will make a great difference in these matters when we come to change the scene. Are you traveling far, Captain Fraser?" "As far as Bath," said the captain. At this moment the landlord returned, saying to Captain Fraser, "I have sent to Mr. Carter, who will be here, no doubt. He is close at hand, and will come in a moment. He is a very clever gentleman, is Mr. Carter. I saw him perform 4 operations on coach accidents." "Operations on coach accidents," said Sir Francis Varney. "A curious matter, that. How did they succeed upon such materials?" "Oh, they were 2 broken arms and 3 broken legs." "Indeed? Did they all recover?" "No, only one got over it." "Upon my word, a promising member of the faculty to entrust so tender a charge to, under such delicate circumstances. But, landlord, have you any bad characters about your house, or in the neighborhood?" "I can't say anything about the neighborhood, though I believe it is as quiet and orderly as can be, or usually is. I never hear anything against it, and know nothing against it, and as for them in the house, I can answer they would not hurt a fly, unless provoked to do so, but what I mean is they are all honest and tried servants." "Well, that is saying a good deal," said Captain Fraser. "But have you any dogs about the house? I mean any large dogs?" "Ah, dogs! Yes, I have several dogs, and good dogs they are, too." "Could any of them get into the rooms? The sleeping rooms, I mean? Could any of them get into the room that has taken fire?" "No, unless the door was opened," said the landlord. "They are not allowed to run about loose here, lest any one should get up in the night and be mistaken for intruders, for my dogs, gentlemen, would take any one they saw moving about outside of a night. But otherwise they are quiet, well-conducted dogs." "Well, you mean to say they could not have got into Miss Stevens's room?" "I do. I am sure of it. They could not, because there were none of them about the house when we went to bed, when the house was shut up at night. However, here is the doctor." The medical man now arrived, and was forthwith introduced to Captain Fraser, who conducted him to the apartment in which Mrs. Fraser and Miss Stevens were awaiting the coming of the doctor. Captain Fraser, after having introduced him to the invalid, returned to the landlord and Sir Francis. "Well, I cannot make it out at all," said Sir Francis. "There must be some mystery in it, I am persuaded, and if that could only be discovered, the matter would lose half its terrors to the mind of the young lady." "No doubt it would do so," said the captain. "The fire and her wound together have made a deep impression upon her." "The wound?" said the landlord. "Is the young lady hurt, then?" "Hurt, indeed. She is seriously hurt. She has received a severe wound in the arm by some one or some dog having seized and bitten her seriously." "God bless me," said the landlord. "I never heard of such a thing. Somebody began to eat her, I suppose? Upon my word, it would almost make one believe we are in the Cannibal Islands, to say the least of it." "Here is the surgeon," said Sir Francis, who noticed that gentleman's approach. "Well, sir," said Captain Fraser, "how is your patient?" "I fear she is much terrified, and if she were to remain here long, I should hardly like to answer for her health. She has received a very severe shock." "Her wound, what think you of that, sir?" "I really can't say anything about it, save that it is a bite, but how inflicted I cannot say. It is very mysterious indeed, very strange. But what I look upon as most important in the affair is the impression it has produced upon her mind. That, you see, may last her all her life, and produce very unfortunate consequences. I do not know that it will be so, but I state what there is a possibility of, or I may more correctly speaking add, of what there is a great probability." "I regret to hear you say so," said Sir Francis Varney. "Do you really imagine the young lady has been bitten by any animal?" Yes, I do. There are evidences enough to prove that. There is the wound in her arm, and the marks of the teeth quite plain, and she suffers from the anguish of it much. But I shall be better able to say more about it early in the morning, when I call again to see her. She will be able to travel, I hope? Oh, yes, she will be able to do that, indeed. I would recommend she should try to do so, as the best means of throwing off all the unpleasant feelings and thoughts upon the occasion. Will you call early tomorrow? I will, said the doctor, and then he bade them good evening, and left. Well, said the landlord, I'm amazed at what the doctor says about the young lady. I'm sorry it should have happened in my house, but I hope something will turn up to make it turn out different. That, I'm afraid, is not possible, seeing you have a clear demonstration of what it is now. The mischief has been done. I am the more sorry, said the landlord, that it is likely to prey upon the young lady's feelings, which are to be considered in the case. Certainly, certainly. There is where the mischief is likely to spring from. However, it is of no use to stand here all night. It is cold. I must get an hour or two's sleep before I get to business in the morning. I think so too, said Captain Fraser. Well, I will bid you good night, Sir Francis, and shall expect you in the morning to breakfast. With pleasure, replied Varney, and they all parted, each going to his own dormitory, to sleep or to think over the events of the night, as best they might. End of chapter 146. Chapter 147 of Varney the Vampyre, Volume 3. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Emily Hoover. Varney the Vampyre, Volume 3, by Peckett PREST. Chapter 147. The next morning came, and with it came also the usual bustle of a country inn, when strangers are stopping there, especially carriage strangers, as well as the usual coach stoppages, when they change horses, which they did more than once that morning. It was at a later hour than usual when the party breakfasted, and it was somewhat late when Sir Francis Varney entered the room. "Good morning," said Sir Francis, with great suavity of manner, and in a most courtly tone. "I trust I see you somewhat recovered from the fright you were put to last night?" "Oh, Sir Francis," said Mrs. Fraser, "it was a dreadful fright indeed, but we have so much to thank you for. To you we owe much, and my sister owes to you a double obligation. You have rescued her twice." "I am happy to think I have been a fortunate instrument in serving you. I trust Miss Stevens is better than she was?" "I think she is better, Sir Francis, but she desires to remain in her apartment until we are ready to start, though I thought it somewhat unreasonable, because if she is to travel, she had better have come out. But her rest was disturbed by the accident, and it might have been early before she slept, and an hour's rest and repose might do much towards recovering her," said Sir Francis. "Her own feelings are a good guide under these circumstances." "I think so too," said Captain Fraser. "I," said young Stevens, "was awoke by a desperate riot caused by people running about. I did not hear anything of the scream." "I was awoke by it," said Captain Fraser. "How did you hear of it? How were you awoke?" "By a loud scream," said Sir Francis. "I was asleep, and when it awoke me I knew not what it was. I remained for a moment or two in doubt as to whether I had not dreamt, but a repetition assured me that I was not dreaming, and knowing from the sound it was a female's voice, I jumped up and dressed myself as well as I could, but before I could do that I heard people running about, and when I got into the gallery I heard the door burst in." "Did anyone come out?" "I cannot say. I saw no one. But the man who first entered the apartment fell down, from some cause or other, and set the bed-curtains on fire. Accidentally, of course, but it was the same in effect." "Did you see anyone in the room, Sir Francis?" "No one at all. I did not even know who slept there, but seeing the form of a human being lying there, and wrapping the bedclothes, or rather seizing her and the bedclothes by grasping with both arms, I carried her out. I used but little ceremony, and the urgency of the case must be my excuse. And it is, Sir Francis, though I know not in what way we can manifest our feelings of gratitude to you. You may, madam, by saying no more about it, but I shall be delighted to think you have such a good opinion of my services, and the knowledge that they have been useful. That is a gratification to me. And one you are well entitled to, Sir Francis, said Captain Fraser. How far are you travelling? Inquired Mrs. Fraser. As far as Bath, madam, for the benefit of my health. We are going to Bath, Sir Francis, as well. I am sure it will be a great pleasure to Captain Fraser to find that we are to have such a travelling companion. That is, if you can accommodate yourself to travelling in a carriage. I can travel as you please. I am mounted, and am used to such travelling, for months at a time. Do you travel much at a time, Sir Francis? Yes, I have been a great traveller for years, not so much as regards distance as to the constancy of my perambulations, for I continue for months together out, riding from one town to another. Without an attendant? Always. I never carry a servant about with me. It cannot be done with comfort by anyone. You have always proper attendants if you stop at a respectable inn or a hotel, or, if not, if the road you have to travel be a cross route, you cannot expect any additional comfort from a servant, but you are troubled at his not being comfortably lodged. At least I am, for I have tried it. I dare say there is much wisdom in that. I know from experience that a single traveller, who has leisure and is willing, may enjoy himself better than he could if he were attended by his servant. You are somewhat restrained in your motions, and cannot do as you would please under all circumstances. I am fully persuaded of that from experience, but I shall travel on horseback till I get to Bath, and then I hardly know whether I shall remain at an hotel, or take lodgings for the season, or what. What we intend is to take lodgings, said Captain Fraser, for a time, as long as we feel inclined, and then to enjoy ourselves. Quite right, said Sir Francis, quite right. I am glad to hear you say so, and I hope it may be of advantage to Miss Stephens. I hope so, too. Shall we have the advantage of your company en route? I shall have great pleasure in having your company so far. It will give me great gratification indeed. I shall be most happy to bear your company as far as the city of Bath, and shall consider myself the gainer by your society. No, we shall be the only party that will benefit by it, but we shall feel greatly your kindness, and I, for one, anticipate much pleasure on the road from your society, and also when we arrive in Bath. I feel such will be the case. At this moment Mr. Carter was announced also. In a few moments more this individual was introduced to them. He was a plain, gentlemanly man, who really was a clever man, notwithstanding the fearful account of his prowess and skill which the landlord had descanted on the previous night. "Well, Mr. Carter," said Captain Fraser, "how do you find my sister? Do you think she is any better than she was?" "I think she is calmer, and much of the first violence of terror is gone, but I cannot say any more. She is still much disturbed. Do you think there is anything dangerous in her state?" "No, sir, I do not. Though I cannot hide from you the possibility that there is of her being permanently affected by it. I mean mentally. It may take a deep hold of her, and there will be no getting her free from it, save by judicious treatment." "You do not consider much, then, of her wound?" "The arm? Oh, yes. That looks very angry, and has been a very severe bite, and has caused her arm to swell, though I have no doubt about its getting well. Still, it will be very painful for some days, and had it been a little more severe, it is possible that some of the tendons might have been injured, or an artery wounded." "Upon my word," said Sir Francis Varney, "this had very nigh turned out a very bad and serious affair, if not a dangerous one." "Of that there can be no doubt," said the doctor. "Well, but, after all, what was it that has caused all this disturbance? What was it, a man or brute?" "Decidedly the latter," said Sir Francis Varney. "Decidedly the latter, be the form of the creature what it may." "Indeed you are right, Sir Francis," said Mrs. Fraser. "But she insists it was a human being who made this abominable attack on her. Why or wherefore no one knows, but she insists it was a man." "What do you say, doctor?" I only know, sir, what the young lady says." "Do you think it probable?" "I cannot say I do. I think it most unlikely, though, to be sure, there is nothing in it that is impossible. Had anyone felt maliciously towards the young lady, they might have perpetrated the crime, but in the absence of all malice, I cannot think so bad of human nature as to believe it." "You discredit it, then?" said Sir Francis Varney. "I do," said the doctor, "with all due respect to the young lady, but the probability of mistake is so great, and when you consider the terror so natural to the occasion, her powers of observation were limited and liable to error, that I cannot myself believe otherwise than there is a great mistake." "And what do you consider of the wounds? I mean, do you think it possible that they were inflicted by human teeth? Are they of that shape and character that could be inflicted by human teeth?" "Yes, decidedly. That is, so far as I am able to judge, while the wound is swelled and angry, I should consider them just such as might be inflicted by the teeth of a man or woman." "That corroborates the young lady's own belief." "It does, so far," said Mr. Carter. "Then comes the question of how it could have been done, and by whom. These seem to be questions which cannot be answered. I asked the landlord all that could tend to elicit that information, but with no success. He knew nothing that could throw any light upon the subject." "Perhaps he knew nothing," suggested Mrs. Fraser. "Most probably he did not," was the reply. "I know the landlord to be a respectable, though somewhat eccentric man, and I think him quite incapable of being a party to such an outrage upon any person, much less upon a lady who was stopping at his house." "Well, however true that may be, yet it is undeniable that this outrage has been committed, though by whom we cannot say, for we do not even suspect anybody. I can't understand it at all." "Nor I, but, as you observed, sir, the outrage has been committed, and here too. But, unfortunately, no one is suspected, and justice cannot be done, which, in such a case, ought to be fully and clearly made out, for there can be no palliation." "None at all." "I wish," said Captain Fraser, "I had been first in the room." "Why, sir?" inquired Sir Francis Varney. "Do you wish that?" "Because, you see, sir, I should have felt that inward satisfaction arising from the fact that I fancy I might have ascertained whether anyone was or had been in the room." "The young lady said there was," said Sir Francis. Yes, but then you saw the door opened and saw no one come out." "I did not, though after I had Miss Stevens in my arms I came away, and then it was possible anyone might have got out, though there were others who would have seen them. But still, in the bustle and confusion of the moment, there might have been somebody." "Yes, there is that possibility," said Captain Fraser. "And I don't see why I should trouble myself about this affair. I mean, by wishing myself there. But I should have done nothing but carry out the body. That would have been my first act." "No doubt," said Sir Francis. "And what made such an act the more necessary is the fact that she was in instant danger of death from burning or suffocation." True. Who would have coolly gazed around him when there on the bed lay the unfortunate victim of God knows what? Well, sir, I must bid you good day. I have some patients to visit." "Not before we square accounts, which is easily done. Let me know how we may stand, sir, and I will pay you at once." This little affair was soon settled, and the doctor was about to depart, when he said, before he left the room, "I have given the young lady directions what to do relative to her arm. She must not use it much, but any medical man who may chance to see it will be able to prescribe for it, though what I have given I deem almost enough to effect her complete restoration as far as regards the arm. The shock the mind and nervous system have sustained will only be eradicated by time and change." "Thank you for your advice. That shall be attended to." The doctor now quitted the hotel, and the landlord entered the apartment with a very serious aspect, and, after making his bow, proceeded to say, "I'm very sorry, sir, for the occurrence of last night. Very sorry indeed. Indeed, sir, I cannot make it out at all. I have inquired all over the house, and nobody at all knows anything about it, nor can't think how it could be. A good many of them won't believe it at all.
though I told them there could be no doubt of it, for the young lady was burnt and the bed set on fire." "You may be sure of that, landlord. The young lady has been bitten on the arm most severely." "And as for the fire," said Sir Francis, "I saw how that occurred." "So you said, sir," replied the landlord. "If that fellow as fell down had stood up, why, it wouldn't have set the curtains afire." "No, that is true." "Well, then, he would have been able to have seen what was the matter, instead of his filling the room full of smoke and fire as he did. He hadn't no excuse to tumble down. Nobody knocked him down." "But didn't he hurt himself very badly?" "Oh, only about 2 or 3 square inches, or perhaps a patch as big as your hand off his chin. That's nothing to such as he." "Very good. But have you examined the place to see if anybody could have got in and concealed himself? Was there any possibility of a man's getting into your house and secreting himself in any part of the bedroom, which would thus afford him an opportunity of doing what has been done?" "Why, sir, I don't think it likely. And yet these people are so cunning that you could not, by any possibility, guard against them in any way, especially in an inn. But there is no house free from intrusion of that character. But in this instance they could have had no notion the young lady was to sleep there." "That is very true," said Captain Fraser, "and tends to show she was not singled out for outrage. But what seems very singular is that any one should secret themselves, and that with a view to commit such an outrage." "That is very true," said the landlord. "But people do very strange things sometimes, and I think the object of anyone hiding himself in the house in such a manner as this rascal must have done was robbery." "But he met with no resistance, and there could have been no excuse for so cowardly an assault as this complained of." "There is much truth in that, and yet we don't know what human nature is capable of," said the landlord. "I have known a few things in my time, but the man, or whatever he might be, might have been tempted to make the assault complained of." "What, then, landlord, you imagine that a thief who had got into the house would make an attempt to eat a young lady?" "Why, as to eating her, sir," said the landlord, scratching his head, "I cannot say he would. I don't know what his intentions might be, nor do I profess to understand it all. I can't, however, see what can be the motive, save malice and spite. They mightn't care whom they injured, so long as somebody was hurt." "They must have been very bad." "Yes, sir, and I wish I had seen them. If I had, I would no more mind chopping them in 2 than I would cleave a marrow bone. I truly hope, sir, you won't consider that, however unfortunate the circumstances are, that I am blamable in this affair. I took all the usual precautions in this affair. That is, my house was secured as usual, and the place watched during the day, for we are particular in that respect, knowing that we are very liable to be robbed." "Exactly," said Captain Fraser. "And though I much regret the occurrence, yet I tell you, I do not see anything in which I say you are to blame. It is simply a great misfortune, and there ends the matter." "Thank you. I regret it as much, I am sure, as anybody, because I am very likely to be injured by it." "You are not to blame. Allow my carriage to be at the door in half an hour, as we shall leave almost immediately." "And my horse, too, landlord, as I bear this gentleman company." The landlord departed and went towards the stables, and gave the necessary orders, while the guests remained, conversing on the extraordinary occurrence that had taken place, and much pleased with the courtesy of their new friend. Many were the speculations that were indulged in respecting the attack upon Miss Stevens, many of them wild, but all wide of the mark, fortunately, for her frame of mind. And then, before they had at all come to any conclusion, or any satisfactory probability, the carriage was announced. "Well, Sir Francis, I presume you will ride with us?" "Yes, on horseback." "I understand so. We shall be much indebted to you for your goodness. But here is Miss Stevens." At that moment the young lady entered the room, ready attired for travelling, but looking very pale and timid. Sir Francis advanced, and, taking her hand, said, "May I have the pleasure of hearing you say the occurrence of last night has done you only a temporary mischief?" "I hope not," said Miss Stevens. "But to you, Sir Francis, I owe everything. I am grateful to you for your ready and effectual aid under such trying circumstances. I am sure I can never repay you for your goodness." "Nay, the task is easier than you imagine," said Sir Francis. "To know that I have saved you, and to see it has been effectual, is repayment enough. I am sure we never feel so much satisfaction and pleasure as when we find our endeavours, however important or unimportant they are, have proved effectual, that we have done what we desired to do. That is ample reward."
"You are so good, Sir Francis."
"We will say nothing about that. None are so perfect but we may see room for amendment. But we will have a truce, I hope, upon this subject, and now converse upon the pleasures of our journey."
"They, I hope, will be many," said Mrs. Fraser.
"I have every expectation of it myself," said Sir Francis. "The day appears fine, and the sun is high. The storm of last evening has cleared the air of much of its heat. It is cool and pleasant. The country will look refreshed, the fields will be quite gay and pleasant, and the face of nature renewed."
"Well, I am certain it will be a pleasant journey under such a change, for I must say it was very sultry yesterday."
"It was," said Captain Fraser.
"The appearance of the earth alone will tell that. But are you all ready?"
"Yes, all," replied Mrs. Fraser.
"Now, my dear Charles, what are you about?"
"I'm looking for my gloves," said the youth, "but I can't find them."
"Never mind them, we shall be off without you."
"I'll come before you have all got into the carriage, so don't wait." "Permit me, Miss Stevens," said Sir Francis, as he offered his arm, "to have the pleasure of seeing you safe into the carriage." The young lady accepted of the proffered arm of Sir Francis, though not without something like reluctance, though why she could not tell. But yet she did not like to appear to hesitate, and forced herself to do what common courtesy, if not gratitude, demanded she should do. She took his arm, and the whole party were shortly seated in the carriage, and, with Sir Francis Varney mounted beside them, they all quitted the inn, where they had experienced such strange vicissitudes of fortune during one night that it would never be erased from their memories. End of chapter 147. Chapter 148 of Varney the Vampyre, Volume 3. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Emily Hoover. Varney the Vampyre, Volume 3, by Thomas Peckett PREST. Chapter 148. The Road and the Travellers, The Pleasures of Doing Good, The Beggar Woman, Sir Francis Varney, a Philanthropist. The road was pleasantly bounded on either side by hill and dale scenery, while it was itself of a very diversified character, and at one moment they passed through long avenues of trees, at other times a bare heath without so much as a dwarf hedge, and then well-cultivated country would succeed, studded with handsome villas and country seats, old half-castellated mansions and halls, where gentlemen lived in the abodes of their ancestors, and felt pride in doing so. The air was balmy and beautiful, every object appeared fresh, and every tree and shrub looked as though new life had been infused into it. The birds sang merrily, and the whole party were in high spirits. "Such scenes as these," said Sir Francis Varney, "please me better than the gaieties and follies of the town. I am sure there is much more happiness to be found by a contented mind than there is in the feverish pleasures of a city." "There is much truth in that, Sir Francis," said the captain. "But in my own case, connected as I am with my professional friends, I cannot follow what is the natural bent of my taste, but I find pleasure wherever I go, for I am determined to make the best of all that passes beneath my observation." "Sweets can be extracted from every bitter, and therefore it is good policy to take the bright side of a picture in all the ordinary relations of life. We are better men and better subjects by so doing." Thus the distance was soon passed over, and a stage was but the same as a pleasant morning ride, and then an hour or two spent of the heat of the day in quiet in some small but respectable inn, with wine and pleasing conversation, gave them a relish for the life they led. The style of the conversation of the stranger, Sir Francis Varney, was pleasing in the extreme. He was evidently a man of great and varied talents and attainments, and one of great experience, and who had seen much of life. 2 days passed this way, and they had not reached Bath. They were tempted to stop longer by the way than they would have done. "To-morrow," observed Sir Francis, "we must reach Bath. About 3 short stages will place us within its precincts, and then, I presume, the assembly-room, as well as the pump-room, will occupy much of your attention." "We shall certainly go there." "Have you been in Bath before?" "Yes, but many years ago, when we were quite children, so that I have no recollection of the place." "And you, Captain Fraser?" "No, I have not. I am quite a stranger there. But for the kindness of your offer, I should have to trust to strangers, or my own good fortune, to find out those things which strangers usually seek, and those places they usually visit." "I shall have great pleasure in showing you that which is worthy of your attention. It is now some years since I was there, but I believe, though there may be improvements, yet the place is essentially the same." "No doubt. Cities seldom alter much, unless it be in their suburbs." "If the alteration be great, it will point itself out." "Exactly so." The party were seated beneath a large cedar tree, which stood in the inn garden, with a table upon which were spread some wine and biscuits, walnuts, and a few things besides, of a character agreeing much with the place. Into this garden crept an unfortunate beggar-woman, who, espying the party from the road, escaped the vigilance of the waiters and menials who hung about the inn, and entered. She crept timidly towards the party, looking wistfully but yet fearful of the consequences of the intrusion, for there was a notice in the village which gave forth fearful threats to them, should they dare to beg for the bread for which they were starving. Presently, finding the captain's eye fixed upon her, with a beseeching look, she dropped her curtsy. "Who is that woman, and what does she want?" All turned to look upon the unfortunate creature, who began her petition by saying, "Kind ladies and gentlemen, pity a poor woman who is starving. I am very weary, and am weak with travelling." "Eh, what do you do here?" exclaimed the waiter. "Come, come, we don't allow beggars in this place. The high roads or the Bridewell are the only places we have in these here parts." "Do not be in a hurry," said Sir Francis to the officious waiter. "It might have been right enough to prevent her entering, but now we have seen her, I cannot, if she deserve it, refuse to aid her in her affliction." The woman dropped a very low curtsy. "My good woman, where have you come from?" "From Bath, sir," said the unfortunate creature. "From Bath, eh? And what took you there?" "I lived there." "You lived there? If that were the case, why should you leave a place where you did live, to wander about where you cannot live? That is a bad policy, methinks. What do you say, Captain?" "I think so too, Sir Francis," said the captain. "But that may be only a verbal blunder of the woman. We can't expect propriety in speaking from such people. It would be expecting too much." "So it would," said Mrs. Fraser. "I have left Bath for 2 reasons, sir," said the woman. "One is, I was too unwell to work, and then my rent got into arrears. While I could work, I did pay my way, though living very hard." "And what was the other reason?" "Why, sir, I was turned out of my lodging, and having nowhere to go to, and finding nobody would assist me, was compelled to beg." "What induced you to take this road, my good woman?" "Because, sir, it will, if I live long enough, carry me to Portsmouth." "Are you known there?" "No, sir." "What induces you to go so far? Speak out, and do not be afraid. We have no object in asking you questions, save with the view of assisting you, if we find you a worthy object." "I am going to Portsmouth," replied the poor creature, "in the hope that I may hear from my son, whom I have not seen these many years, and who went to sea about 7 years ago." "You have a son, then?" "Yes, sir. I had one. God knows if I have one now." The poor woman uttered these words with such sorrowing accents that all were convinced of the truthfulness of them. "Speak out, and tell us your story. Bring the poor woman some refreshment," said Sir Francis. "Her tale may interest us, and give us food for reflection. I am sure one cannot hear the misfortunes of others without feeling grateful for the luxuries and blessings one enjoys over and above the common lot of mankind." "That is very true, Sir Francis," said Mrs. Fraser. "And I am sure we ought not to pass those whom we can assist by a trifle, when our means will permit our doing so." "You are perfectly correct, ma'am." "Have you no husband?" inquired Mrs. Fraser. "None, ma'am, none. When I had one, I had a good home over my head. I would not wish for happier or better days to come again." "What was your husband?" "A respectable tradesman, who kept a good house and his own servants. We spent such a life as that for nearly 15 years. "And how came it to a close?" "His death, sir, which was brought on by a sudden cold. In a few days he was a corpse. I can never forget that dreadful day. We were living very comfortably and happy. My husband had just at that time entered into some speculations that promised to make a handsome fortune in a few years, and all promised success and happiness, complete and continued." "How great a change!" said Miss Stevens. "Yes, miss, great indeed. My husband, hearing some news that caused him to be anxious to ascertain its truth, he left home one wet night, and got drenched through, and where he went to, he was obliged to remain in damp clothes, and, not being a strong man, he took a violent cold, and inflammation followed. After this he had medical advice, but he soon sank, and was pronounced beyond recovery. He died a very few hours after that, and I was left a widow. A few short hours caused a great change in my circumstances." "What became of the business?" "Why, that was carried on for a time, but an accident deprived me of that." "What was that?" "I will tell you, sir. My son was about 14 years of age when his father died, and was just able to carry on the business, and I believe we should have done pretty well, because he was a steady youth, and I could trust him, and he looked after the men employed, and I was not robbed. However, a severe misfortune awaited me. I thought the loss of my husband a dreadful misfortune, and I believe it was. But in his case he left one behind who could help to maintain me. His loss I mourned, but it did not produce the same disastrous results that the loss of my son produced." "How came you to lose him?" inquired the captain. "Why, sir, I had occasion to have some business transacted at Bristol. I could send no one else, though I could ill spare him. But then I was compelled to send him, and did send him. It was to accommodate some terms of sale, and he only knew the affair. He, therefore, went to Bristol. He was pleased enough, being his first journey, and I could hardly have resisted his importunity if I had been so inclined. He left me, and arrived safely in Bristol, and was there a day or two, when, walking about one evening by the waterside, he was seized by a press-gang, and carried out to sea. It was useless for him to complain or to entreat. They would take him, and forced him on board a man-of-war." "He served his king and country, then?" said the captain. "I honour him, upon my soul. And you are going to learn something of him, if he be dead or alive?" "Yes, sir. I know this much. He was alive about 2 years ago, and expected to reach Portsmouth in a couple of years." "Well, proceed." "When I heard my fate, the detention of my son, I was thrown on a bed of illness, in which I lay for nearly 3 months, during which time I was completely robbed and run into debt, and when I recovered I had but a few pounds in the world, for an execution had been put into the house, and all was sold. Thus I was left without a friend or a soul to comfort me, or any relative upon whom I could call for aid and assistance. I had no right to do so to anyone, and after my misfortunes I found that my former friends deserted me. I found that it was necessary to have the means of purchasing friends, just the same as anything else. I could obtain them for money, but without money I had no friends. I was by far too independent to ask for what I felt I was capable of earning. I could live upon little, and I at once left all who had formerly known me before I attempted anything. I was determined that I would not even ask work at their hands, but get it among strangers. Of course, this caused me to seek a subsistence in the lowest capacity, and I cared not for it, because it put a still greater barrier between me and my late acquaintances. It was a long time before I obtained any employment, because I was unknown to anyone who could recommend me, or who wanted my services. This was to be expected, but the first place I obtained work at was through the interest of my landlady, and then I obtained more afterwards, and one led to another, until I obtained a hard-earned but honest living. I had a little money by me, some 2 or 3 pounds, in case of being out of work, or in case illness overtook me. Then I had something to fly to, the workhouse being a place of all others I most dreaded. Sooner than go there I would consent to die by the roadside, and I have put my resolution to the test. You lost your work? I fell ill for some months. All my little store of money was gone, and my rent grew in arrear. I became more and more deeply indebted, and what food I obtained was given me by others out of charity. But this could not last long, and as soon as I was able to walk, my landlady asked me for my rent. I then told her that I had no money, but that in a few weeks, if I could find food to enable me to get up my strength, I should then be able to work, and I would then pay her off by degrees, until I was out of debt. She knew what I had been, and had some thought that I had money, or if I pleased I could obtain it from my former friends, and expected me to make the attempt. But this I refused, and upon my doing so, she, after the first expressions of astonishment and anger, gave me the alternative of doing so, or leaving the house. I was turned out, and had no refuge. I wandered about, and knew not where to go or what to do. Indeed, I was houseless and friendless, a wanderer without a penny. I could not now obtain work. I could not do it, and my appearance caused people to shut their doors against me, and I wandered about begging. This was the first time I ever took what I had not earned, save what was voluntarily given me when I was ill. One evening, as I was creeping about, I heard some men conversing about the different vessels that were out at sea, and one of them named the one in which my son was. I instantly listened, and heard one of them say that she was on her voyage homewards, and would be home in a month. I had no sooner heard this than I had some hope. I will go, I said, to Portsmouth. I will meet my son, and he will not refuse to support his unfortunate mother. I know his disposition too well to dream of it, and should he be unable to do so, I will beg for him. I slept in Bath that night, and then began to consider how I should get to Portsmouth. It was a long road. Many weary miles must be walked over ere I could get there, and as for the means, I must trust to the charity of the passengers. It would not be much more than what I was doing. I could sit on a doorstep and beg, but to walk on the road, where there were few or no passengers, I might starve. However, I resolved to make the attempt, because I loved my son, and if I could see him, I should see an end to my misery. I started out about 4 days ago, and I have got this far, but I have had only bread on the road, and almost despair of being able to reach there, and the charity of people is not enough to support life upon. And where have you slept as you came along? Wherever I could, sir, beneath a haystack or even a hedge. Where did you sleep last night? Beneath a haystack about 7 miles from this place. And is that all you have got through today? Yes, sir, every step. And considering my weak state, I consider it good travelling, and shall feel thankful for even that rate of travelling. You do not know how intensely I wish to get to see my son. I have no doubt of it, my good woman, and if I can, I will help you on the road. I think yours is a case that deserves some attention. If you choose to remain here all night and rest, you may. You shall have food till you go, and some food shall be placed in your hands before you go."
"God bless you, sir," said the poor woman in tears. "You will indeed do an act of kindness to me."
"You will stop?"
"And be grateful to you for your kindness."
"Here, waiter," said Sir Francis. "Yes, sir," said that worthy, running up. "Just take this person and see that she wants for nothing. Let her have a bed here, and breakfast in the morning, and let me know what the charges are, and I will pay for it. Do you hear what I say to you?"
"Yes, sir,"
exclaimed the waiter, who considered the charge as one beneath his dignity, but he was forced to obey, and the woman was desired to follow him, which she did, after thanking Sir Francis Varney for his humanity and generosity.
"Upon my word, Sir Francis," said Mrs. Fraser, "you do those things as if they were common occurrences to you."
"Why, madam, I am, and perhaps I ought to abstain from making the confession, one who does not love to come in contact with misery. But then one does not feel justified in turning away from it."
"You must have a deep purse to be able to satisfy all such claimants."
"I cannot do that, if I were inclined, or they were deserving, which many are not, as you, no doubt, must be well aware."
"Indeed, that is a fact. Very few of the claimants possess the same strength of right to our pity and commiseration. I am certainly struck with the woman's manners, and her artless mode of telling her story."
"Exactly. It bears the impress of genuineness about it."
"So it does."
"And when that is the case, I cannot resist the sense of my duty, which impels me to aid the distressed. But then I injure no one. I have ample means, and, therefore, others may do less, and yet deserve more credit. I have no heirs to come into my property, and I cannot, therefore, injure anyone. If I were to give it all away, I should be entitled to do so."
"You are so good, Sir Francis, as you are courageous and fortunate," said Miss Stevens. "I am sure I have every reason to be thankful to you for 2 preservations."
"Nay, say no more about the past. You say things at which I ought to blush to hear, for my modesty is greater than you imagine. But seriously, I take more pleasure in it than most people, and that may be a set-off against my disinterestedness, for I am only laying out my money in pleasure and amusement."
"No, no, that will not pass."
"It will, I hope. But permit me to return and see how they have disposed of this temporary protégé of mine."
"Certainly, Sir Francis, don't let us detain you. We shall remain here some time longer, and then we shall leave the shelter of this house."
End of chapter 148.
Chapter number 149 of Varney the Vampire, Volume 3. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Sandra Estenson. Varney the Vampire, Volume 3 by Thomas Prescott Press. Chapter number 149. After Sir Francis Varney had left the place where the Frasers were sitting, there was a long silence, in which each of the party appeared to be engaged in meditating deeply upon something or other, and yet each shrunk from expressing them. The first who broke the silence was Captain Fraser, who said, "Well, my dear, what do you think of our new acquaintance?" "I think he is a most amiable man." "Very courtly," observed his sister. "Yes, a sure sign of good breeding, of good company." "He is that," said Captain Fraser. "I never met with one in whom dignity, ease, and complete and unceremonious courtesy were so blended." "And he appears to be a very kind and amiable man." "But," said Miss Stevens, "he is also very strange and a very singular man. A very singular man indeed. I never saw such a man before, or anyone approaching him. What a strange complexion!" "He has a singular complexion, and it strikes me he's well aware of it, and that is the reason why he prefers a country to a town life, and his solitariness, together with his manners, all indicate that his peculiarity in this respect causes him much annoyance." "I dare say it may," said Captain Fraser. "I never saw anything so truly terrible," said Charles. "Hush! Do not speak in that way, Charles. It is ungrateful." "I hope not. It's merely the truth. I never saw a corpse so pale. Indeed, he is just such as one you might imagine to have started out of a grave with an unwholesome life, and whoever had resurrected him had forgotten to warm his blood, or to put blood in his veins." "How very absurd of you, Charles! I'm sure St. Francis Varney deserves better of you than that. You're under a great obligation to him. I feel assured he feels the peculiarity of his complexion. I mean, it has an effect upon his mind, and if we knew the cause of it, it is possible some disinterested action, terminating in evil to himself, has been the cause of it." "Well, sister, I do not mean to say that you can admire such a visage, but you ought not to say I am ungrateful, for I am not. And moreover, I never saw any gentleman whom I liked better. His conversation is quite superior. But then gratitude surely does not prevent one noticing so glaring a circumstance." "Certainly not," said Captain Fraser, "though I fancy it would be better to remain silent upon such topics, if we cannot commiserate them." "I think you're quite right, Fraser," said Mrs. Fraser. "He deserves respect at our hands, and the less that is said in regard to his misfortunes the better." "I think the evening is getting very cool," said Miss Stevens. "Will you remain here any longer? I shall return to the house." "We may as well all go, especially if you feel chilly." "I do." "Then come along. Tomorrow we shall be in Bath. Come, sister, you must be quite well to share in the gaieties of the place. You know you said you should have all the greatest pleasure there, and have been anticipating it all along." "I did," said her sister. "Well, but you will do so now. Why should your expectations not be fulfilled? I see no reason why they should not. Bath is a gay place, and a city apparently made solely for the amusement of those who can pay for them." "I have been so alarmed and terrified, sister." "I know that, my dear, but you have now had 2 days' constant change of scene, and lived, I must say, almost wholly in the open air, so that you ought not now to be very nervous, sister." "I might have been worse under other treatment," replied Miss Stevens, "but at the same time you can have no idea of what it is to suffer from such an outrage. You cannot conceive anything like it." "I dare say not. I am sure it must have been dreadful." "It must," said the captain, "but we will not say anything about a matter so disagreeable and so inexplicable. Suppose we go in." "With all my heart. We shall be in Bath tomorrow, and you will have nothing to fear. How does your arm feel now?" "Sore, but much of the inflammation has gone down. That, I think, will soon be well, and then I shall be able to use it as I used to do. I don't think it will leave any permanent injury of evil behind." "I'm glad of it," said the captain. Now they all returned to the inn, while the whole of the party passed the remainder of the evening in company, retiring at an early hour with the view of rising early for the purpose of getting into Bath in the afternoon, or before the evening set in, at all events. The next morning came, and with it a cloudless day. They were all in high health and spirits, and sat down to a breakfast that was especially prepared for them. "What has become of your protégé?" said Mrs. Fraser to Sir Francis. I have not seen her this morning. I've not risen long, and I've had no time to spare, but intend to see her before I go, and see that she has means to reach Portsmouth in safety." "Will you send for her here, Sir Francis?" "Certainly, if you wish it," said Sir Francis. "I will tell the waiter to inquire if she be ready, and, before she goes, to send her up. That will be best." This accordingly was done, and in about a quarter of an hour the poor woman came up to the room. There were several alterations for the better in her appearance, and she did not look so careworn and cast down as she had done. She appeared thankful and refreshed with rest and food. "You are now ready to start, my good woman?" said Sir Francis. "I am, sir, thanks to you. I wish you all possible success in your mission, and I hope your son may be living, and prove grateful to you as his mother." "If living, I am sure he will, sir, and I do not doubt now but I shall be able to meet with him, thanks to your bounty." "I hope you may. Have they treated you well in the house below?" "Yes, very well, sir, and kindly." "I'm glad of it. Have you any food given you to carry you on your road?" "I have, thank you, sir." "Then there remains now nothing to be done but to give you some silver to enable you to provide lodgings, and now and then a lift on the road." "Thank you, sir," said the unfortunate widow as she took the silver which Sir Francis held out to her. She could only shed tears of gratitude, and Miss Stevens added some to it from her own pocket. "You have our best wishes," said Sir Francis Varney. "Go now. We have done all we can for you. Good day." "God bless you," said the woman. "May you never experience misfortune, or ever know the want of even luxuries. You who can give deserve to have. The poor and unfortunate have few such as you, sir, for benefactors." "That will do," said Sir Francis. "Good day to you." "Good day, ladies and gentlemen," said the woman. Curtsying low, and then turning round, she left the apartment. "Poor thing," said Sir Francis. "She has a long journey before her. A temporary aid given to poor people often lifts them above want and places them in a decent position in society." "So it does," said Mrs. Fraser. "Yet you see, people disclaim charity, and say private charity is pernicious in its effects. But are there not two sides to any picture? An individual might as well say it was pernicious to take medicine, because people sometimes poison themselves with some of the ingredients. Besides that, it does good to the state, for it often prevents such a one from coming to the state and being a burden upon society at large. I'm really of opinion that much temporary distress might by aid be avoided, while without that aid it would in all probability become permanent." "There is much wisdom in what you have said, Sir Francis, though you must be aware that it opens a door to much abuse and reliance upon the charity of others, which can scarcely be credible." "Oh yes, I expect there is an abuse of everything, but we do not from that argue its total cessation." At that moment the landlord entered the room, saying the carriage was ready as it had been ordered. "Then we may as well at once proceed to the carriage, which is waiting, and we are ready to depart." "And," added Sir Francis, "I am ready too." They once more left the house they had slept in, and the carriage again bore them onwards towards the city of Bath, which was now only 3 short stages from them, and where they could arrive at almost any hour they pleased, if they chose rapid travelling. But this they did not, because it deprived them of much of the pleasure of travelling, the views and beauties on the road. There were many gentlemen's seats on the road which called forth comment and admiration, as well as many smaller estates and houses that were often picturesquely situated, as well as lonely. At length they came within sight of the famed city, and each moment they neared it saw fresh evidence of a large and populous place. However, they stopped not, but the closer they came to the town the faster they went, until they were really within the city. "Here we are in Bath at length," said Sir Francis. "It is a fine city, and much of fashion and talent may be found here." "I am glad we arrived here at last," said Captain Fraser. "And so am I," said Mrs. Fraser, "for I am almost tired of riding every day. I began to want rest. I want to stop for a time in one place." "We get fatigued even with change," said the captain, "after a time, and yet our lives are a complete round of change." "Yes, if you consider the character of time." Now they stopped at one of the principal hotels, into which they all entered and ordered their dinner, and while the ladies arranged themselves for the occasion, Sir Francis, Varney, and Charles walked out into the town, where they amused themselves with looking at the different objects which were presented to the gaze of the stranger. In all these things Sir Francis appeared to be well versed, knew what was now and what had been formerly. 2 days had passed, and there had been but little time lost, so far as the visiting of one part of the city and another was concerned, and they gradually became acquainted with and visited the different places of amusement, at least so many of them as could be visited by them in the time. Sir Francis Varney was the chaperon, and as he obtained attention and consideration wherever he went, he was a valuable aid and assistance, and the family had now got quite used to him, and he to the family. The peculiarity of his countenance or complexion wore off, his pleasing manners producing an effect that acted as an antidote to that, which was likely to cause some peculiar feelings in all who looked at him. But his courtly manners completely took from any one with whom he came in contact the power and the desire to exhibit any dislike or aversion. However, there was not one among all those who looked upon him who did not look upon him with various emotions, but they were only such as a result from a source that acted upon their feelings and tastes without producing any deep or permanent emotion in anyone. Great care was taken by Sir Francis in dress, and his display was altogether good, but there was no ostentation. His manners were those of a man who was used to the position and sphere above what he had even then moved in. There was no mistake in the matter at all, and the Frasers were well convinced that he was what he appeared to be, and there was, moreover, an evident partiality for Miss Stevens manifested by him, which had already been more than once remarked by the captain and his lady, who tacitly approved the honour, though nothing was broached on either side. "Sir Francis appears to be a very gentlemanly man," said the captain. "Very," said the lady, "very. I never saw one whom I could find so little fault with. Indeed, I may say he had none." "That is a very extensive compliment in all events," said the captain. "No fault is a thing that you can say of but very few people indeed." "I mean as far as personal behavior is concerned. Of course I know nothing more. His demeanor appears perfectly unexceptionable. I am sure I never saw anyone at all his equal in that respect." "Perhaps not. He appears to be very attentive to your sister. Indeed, I should say he appears to be very partial." "I think so too. What do you say to Sir Francis Varney, Mary?" inquired Mrs. Fraser. "As a lover, eh?" "I cannot think of him in such a light," said Miss Stevens. "And wherefore not?" inquired the captain. "Because I could not bear the idea. I don't know why. I can't tell you. But I could not do so. It would be against my nature to accept of such a lover. It would much pain me to refuse one who had done so much for me, but I could not accept of him." "Upon my word, you appear to feel strangely upon this matter," said the captain, "but I think you might think twice before you answered thus." "No, think how much I might, it could make no alteration in my mind, for the more gratefully I think, and the more I endeavor to be, yet the stronger would be my repugnance to have such a man for a lover." "Dear me, Mary, how can you say so?" "I do indeed." "Ah, well, girls will be girls, but he has not done you with the distinguished honor to ask you, so you must not refuse in anticipation. You may consider the grapes are sour because they hang so high." "You ask me a question to which I have given you the best answer I can upon the moment. Besides, we know nothing of Sir Francis." "We know enough of him, I think, to speak and think with the utmost gratitude of him. Not that that should make any of us overlook the precautions that are usual on such occasions. And as for your opinion, why, that might be amended by time, and I'm sure that what we do know of him is enough to cause us to respect him and to have confidence in him. He has not sought our acquaintance, and that is one guarantee in his favor." "So it is. But all this is useless. Sir Francis appears very sensitive. He is of retired habits and tastes, and perhaps something of that may result from the disadvantage under which he lies, which he may feel severely." "So he might, and therefore I would never, if I could help it, make any personal allusion of any character before him, even though I were speaking of someone else, and it had no reference to him, as he might apply it to himself." "That is quite right, and just what it ought to be." End of chapter 149. Recording by Sandra Estenson. Chapter number 150 of Varney the Vampire, Volume 3. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Sandra Estenson. Varney the Vampire, Volume 3, by Thomas Prescott Prest. Chapter 150. Sir Francis Varney, when he walked out into the city of Bath, appeared to be lost in deep thought, and walked along as if he saw nothing that was going on around him. He was lost in meditation. Something weighed heavy upon his mind, and he now and then muttered inaudibly to himself. Whatever might have been his purpose, he merely wandered about without going to any one place, as if he were in search for an adventure rather than having any specific and determinate object. But after much wandering about, he came near the corner of a street, where he saw two persons conversing together. A stray word appeared to rivet his attention, and he paused and stepped into the shadow of a doorway and listened. "You see, Martha, Aunt Matthew is an old miser. She would sooner see all the world at the last gasp before she would dream of parting with a shilling. I'm sure it is much too bad." "What is too bad?" "Why, that she, and such as she, should have so much money, and others who work hard should have none, or even the means of procuring it." "Yes, it is hard, and yet if those who have it did not keep it, there would be no one who would be worth money." "That is all very well, but the more money circulates, the more hands it gets into, and that, of course, enriches every one who has for a time the possession of it, for they do not part with it unless they have value for it." "Well, well, that may do very well, but it does not appear to me to be any business of mine that such as one should beg anything of anybody else. But no matter, she has money enough, She is single, is she not?" "Yes," replied the other. "Then you may, after all, possess all she has." "I may, but she is fat and 40. She may live for years, and in the meantime I am a beggar all my life." "No, no, not so bad as that. And what is worse than all, while she is living she is decreasing the money she has, and it will yearly get less and less, till, if any comes to me, it will be so small a portion of it that I am sure there will be but little good come of it." "Indeed, if she is such a miser as you speak of, I should have imagined that the property, personal or real, would increase under such management as that." "It would, if she were not living on the principal." "On the principal? What do you mean?" "That she lives on the principal, as I told you. She has got some strange fancies in her head, and one of them is that the banks will break, all and every one of them, from one end of the kingdom to the other." "What a notion!" "Yes, and that is not all. She believes that all banks will break, so all the public securities will be of no use, but only so much waste paper, and real property will all be seized, and there will be, I don't know what, universal ruin, desolation, and disorganization." "What does she do?" "Why, keeps all of her cash at home, and then goes to her strong box and takes out her bright gold guineas, which appear in such abundance that it would seem as if it could never sensibly diminish, and thus she's been going on for a matter of 2 years or more." "Upon my word, what can she dream of?" "If she go on in that manner, I'm sure too that she will be a beggar." "That is certain, but she thinks not, and you can't argue her into any other belief whatever that is contrary to this matter. However, I have no favor in her eyes because I am a relative." "And why should that be?" "Because, bring her relative, she thinks I may be wishing her dead every day she lives. So, you see, if she go on with this feeling about her, she may take a complete dislike to me, and I should never have a farthing left, even if she died before all was gone and dissipated." "Very true. Where do you live?" "I have been living with my aunt." "Indeed! And where may that be?" inquired her companion. Why, don't you know number 109 Chapel Street? But I have left there. That is, I shall do so tonight." "Will you?" "You are wrong." "I doubt it very much indeed." "What motive can you assert there is to make a good policy in doing this?" "She will think I do not care about waiting for her money, and that motive being observed, I am sure it will influence her in my favor." "Then you will not go back tonight?" "No, not at all." "Well, you know best. But I should go, however. I must now leave you and bid you good day. I must go." "Good day," said the other, and they quitted the place. When the two speakers had left the spot, Sir Francis Varney came forth from his hiding place and gazed after them for some moments in silence. But when they were no longer in sight, he muttered, "Could anything be more fortunate? I am reduced to the last guinea. I have not another pound to pay my way with, just at a moment, too, when I think I may be successful at last in securing a victim." He then walked onwards until he came to the neighborhood of the street he had heard the stranger name, and then he paused and approached the house with some curiosity, but passed by it without stopping. It was a corner house, and a blank wall ran a short way down the street, being the side of the house, and a small portion of ground called a yard. Here the wall was lower. There was a chance of getting over, and here Sir Francis Varney paused a moment, as if examining the place with care and scrutiny. He looked all around, and saw no one approaching. He heard no sound, and he saw no face in any window that was within sight. It was, moreover, too dark to be seen, and he, without a moment's hesitation, ran a few paces towards the wall, and by a violent effort succeeded in placing one hand upon the summit, and then the other soon followed. Sir Francis Varney was a man of great agility and strength, and he was not long in drawing himself up to the top, and then he dropped down. It was fortunate he dropped heavy, and also fortunate, from that circumstance, he fell upon something soft. The good fortune of the occurrences was dependent upon each other. We say it was fortunate he fell heavy, because he fell upon the old lady's yard dog, an unamiable cure, and prevented an alarm, for the dog was crushed and unable to utter a single howl before the animal died. There was now nothing to do but enter the house, if the back door was opened. But upon trial this proved not to be the case. This was a matter that required some consideration. The door was not to be forced, and he hoped to get in by that means, but he was foiled. But yet it was something to have possession of the yard. He could hide there, but yet that increased his danger, for if he remained there he was liable to a discovery, and that too before any attempt had been made upon the coffers of the old woman, and no good effected by him. What to do he could scarcely tell, but after some thought he determined to attempt the back windows in the parlor or room above the ground, and to effect this purpose he would have to get upon a water butt, and thence to the railings facing the windows of the room, and which appeared to have no shutters. Having once made up his mind, he set about it at once, and was soon on the top of the water butt, and made good his hold upon the small balcony, and then he drew himself up. This was a work of some difficulty, because the balcony was very close to the window, and left him no room to lean over, but yet he succeeded, and found to his great joy that the window was only closed without being fastened. He had only cautiously and noiselessly to lift it up, and he could enter it. This he did at once, and then stood in the room. But all was dark, and he could not hear a sound throughout the house, for he listened many minutes, lest he might be suddenly interrupted on by someone, and then there would be no escape from there, and he would possibly lose all. Caution, therefore, was the order of the day, and he gently closed the window, lest the draught might be felt in some other parts of the house. That was very fortunate, for there was every possibility of a discovery resulting from such a course, for anyone feeling a greater than usual draught would soon inquire into the cause. Having got thus far, he opened the door and walked into the passage, and then he heard the sound of conversation being carried on in an undertone. He listened at the door, and heard two female voices. "Betty," said one. "Yes, ma'am," replied the other. "Have you shut the shutters and locked up all the doors?" "Yes, ma'am." "The kitchen door?" "Yes, ma'am, all right as can be. Nobody can get in, I'll warrant." "You don't say so." "Oh, but I do. The dog's out in the yard too." "When you have had tea, I'll have him brought in. He mustn't lay out there, poor creature, to spoil his coat and catch cold. I'm almost thinking I ought not to let him stay out to this hour." "He's well enough. He'll not hurt. He's got the kennel to sleep in, and he's plenty of straw. There's many a one about these parts as would be glad of such a bed. I've taken care of him." "Very well, Betty, sit down to tea, and when it's over I'll bet you anything that old Martha Bell will be here." "Lord bless me, ma'am, you don't say so." "Yes, I do, but I won't be at home. She and I have fallen out of late, and I'm not inclined to make up the quarrel, for she won't believe the banks will break, and you know they will, Betty." "To be sure, ma'am, they will. I know very well they will. It's quite certain as the almanac." "Yes, and what's worse, she wanted to borrow £10, and that, you know, will never do at any price. She would break, too, and then I should have lost number one, and no one can tell how soon number two might follow." "He, he, he," said Betty. "Oh, lawks, I shall split." "What's the matter now? What are you laughing at, silly?" "Oh, you're so funny, ma'am. I'm sure you'd make anybody laugh. You do joke so. It makes one laugh." "Laugh? What is there funny in losing £10? I should like to know. Nobody would laugh at that, I should imagine. I'm sure I should laugh at nothing of that sort. If you were to lose 10 shillings, I'm sure that I should not laugh at you, nor do I think you would either." "No, ma'am, I'm sure you would not, and I'm sure I should not. But you do say such things that make me forget all about money." "Well, then, go downstairs and fetch some more coals." "Yes, ma'am," said Betty, and before Sir Francis Varney had time to slip back and open the door of the other room, the door of the one he was listening at was suddenly opened, and Betty stood before him. She came out plump before he had time to step back, and she ran against him before she was aware anyone was there, for coming from a room where there was light, she could not see at all in the dark passage. "Oh, my—" She had got thus far in her exclamation when she received a heavy blow from the intruder which felled her senseless to the floor, and as quick as thought he drew his dress sword and plunged the point through her heart. Not a groan followed. She was dead, and might be said to have died while bereft of sense or motion. "What is the matter, Betty?" said the woman, her mistress. No answer was returned, and Varney paused, as if uncertain what to do. He was in some doubt if he should or not go in, or await the woman's approach to where he stood. He had not been seen, or she would have screamed out, and if he went to her she would see him and have time to alarm people. He paused and waited her coming, but she appeared to defer doing so, and merely said, "Betty, Betty, what has ailed you? What can be the matter? You don't mean to say that the tea has got into your head?" "No, no," she muttered, after a pause. "That can't be the case. She must have been to my medicine bottle, and that has been too strong for her. I shall discharge her. She'll be breaking something or other, and then who knows where that will end? Begin by breaking a basin, and end by breaking the bank." So saying, she muttered something unintelligible to Varney, and then began to rise and walk along the room towards the door. This was a moment of suspense. The door opened suddenly, and then she stood before Varney, who made a rapid thrust with his sword. This would have been as fatal as that which she had dealt Betty, but the mistress was more fortunate at the moment, for a steel busk was the means of preventing its taking effect. "Murder! What do you want? Oh, you wretch! I know you now. Depend upon it, you shall be hanged. Murder! Murder!" "One word, and you are a corpse," said Varney. "Mercy! Mercy! Will you spare me? Will you spare my life?" "I will." "Oh, thank you, thank you. I never hurt you, and I don't think you would me. I'm very sorry that I made any noise. But you will spare me?" "Yes, upon one condition." "On a condition?" said the woman tremblingly. "Yes, upon a condition. Tell me what it is that you require of me. I will comply." "Then," said Varney, after a moment's pause, "show me where you keep your money. I must have money, so give me plenty." "Plenty of money, did you say?" "Yes, plenty. I want some. You have money, I know. Gold. Gold in quantity." "Gold? Oh, yes, gold. How funny!" "Funny? Is my sword funny?" asked Varney. "Because if you think so, you may have a small portion of it, which you may consider funnier still." "No, no, but I have no money, none at all, save a little money I have for immediate expenses. I have but little, for nobody nowadays keeps money in houses if they can get any at any time." "But you have plenty of money." "I haven't any, upon my—" "You have. You keep it in the house, you know, because the banks might break, and you would lose all. Now give me some at once, or you are dead as any nail in your house. Mark that." "Oh, dear! Oh, yes! What would you have of me?" "Money," said Varney, pressing the point of his sword against her side. "Oh, mercy! I'll tell you all. But you must be satisfied with what I have got, and not leave me a beggar, or kill me because I have no more." "I will be satisfied with what you have got, but that I know to be much more than I can carry away with me." "Oh, good Lord, you don't know me, or else you would know the reverse of that. A poor lodging housekeeper is not the person to have money in the house. But if the truth must be told, I have upstairs my quarter's rent, which I ought to give my landlord. I can give you that, but God knows how he will believe me when I tell him that I have lost it." "You have all your property about you. You have gold in quantities." "I have not." "Then take the fruits of your obstinacy," said Varney in a fury, and making a savage and sudden lunge at her, he passed his sword through her breast, and with a smothered scream she fell to the earth, where she lay gasping and writhing for several seconds, when a rapid gurgling sound came from her throat, and she died. "'Tis done," said Varney to himself. "'Tis done, and it would have been as well if I had done it first. But no matter, 'tis done quietly." There lay the two bodies upon the flooring, the one in the passage by the door, and the other in the parlor. There was a long pool of black blood extending from one to the other of the two corpses. They mingled their blood in death, though they held different positions in life. What could be done? There they were, and even Varney could not pick his way without treading in the blood. He at once entered the apartment and began to examine the whole place, but he did not find much there, a few odd pounds, and yet he turned everything upside down, to use a common phrase. But yet there was nothing of the sort which he hoped for and expected to find. "Can I have mistaken the place?" was his first thought. Upon consideration he saw reason enough to make his mind easy upon the score of mistakes in that matter. There was the number and the street. The old woman and her conversation answered exactly to what he had heard, and after a few moments' consideration he muttered, "It must be right. There are more rooms than one in the house. I will go and search through the rooms, and if I don't find any, I will set the house on fire. Indeed, I think that will be better done, and it will prevent the deed taking light, and as little suspicion may be as well incurred as can be." This was a thing only thought of to be resolved on, but he cast that aside and proceeded with his search, and having finished that room he splashed through the blood and once more stood in the passage. "And now for the bedrooms," he muttered. The candle he held was the only one he could obtain, and he was compelled to walk steadily, lest he should lose its aid by going out. However, he soon got up the stairs and walked into the best bedroom, where he again began to search about for the hidden treasure, but found it not. Curses upon the stupidity of the old fool! Where does she hide her money? I'm sure that she has it here, and I want to get back without delay. I did not want to be away long, and I have been, I dare say, an hour." This was true, and he turned things over and about in great haste, but his endeavors had likened to have been useless as regarded the discovery. Only his eye chanced to light upon a panel. He started up and pulled away apart the bed curtains, behind which it was partially concealed. "Ha ha! What have we here? What I've been wishing to find, no doubt. This is the secret hiding place of her gold, the treasury." However, whatever it might be, it did not appear to be in his power to determine, for he could not open it. This was, of course, a provoking state of things, and Varney seized hold of each implement that came to his hands, but threw each down again, being unable to effect his object by any means whatever. He started up suddenly after making many desperate attempts to break the door open, which, however, were futile, and exclaimed, "There are keys to these places, and I'm sure the old woman must have them about her. If this place be really the receptacle of her wealth, as I have every reason to believe it is, I will find out if I can. No doubt, however, I shall find it upon her somewhere. I'll try." He immediately went downstairs and found the body of the old woman. It was fast stiffening, but the clothes were all sopping in blood, and he turned her over hastily until he found out the pocket, and from that he drew a bunch of keys. They were all bloody, but he did not hesitate about seizing them. "These will no doubt let me into the secret. I shall find my way in now, and then the house will no longer hold me." He turned and quitted the corpse, and in going upstairs he saw for the first time that the stairs all bore the imprint of his own foot. He saw they were stained in blood, and were clear, distinct, and well defined. "It matters not," he muttered. "The fire will and shall efface that, and besides, if it did not, what care I?" He ran up the stairs and again entered the bedroom, and was once more kneeling in front of the door of the cupboard. The bunch of keys was composed of many, and he tried one after the other, until after many trials he came to one which was of a peculiar make and shape, and which convinced him he was now in possession of the right key. "I think I have succeeded now," he muttered, as he put the key into the lock. It fitted very closely into the lock, and then it slowly turned, and he saw the door open, but it only disclosed another door. "What is the meaning of this?" muttered Varney. "What, is there another door to be found? I suppose some of these keys will fit this as well." However, he was not compelled to make the search, for the key of this inner door hung up by one corner on a little hook in a niche which had been apparently cut out on purpose. This was soon opened, and then came rather a startling sight. In a small cupboard were packed a heap of human bones, more than bones, for they had yet the flesh dried and sticking to them. The skull was brown and bare, save here and there remained some hair. "What's the meaning of this?" he muttered angrily. "And have I troubled myself in this matter for only a few bones?" It was, however, an apparent fact. There was the place, and it was now opened, and the contents were plain enough. Bones, bones, human bones. There could be no mistake, and Varney rested his hand on his knee and gazed intently into the cupboard at the bones. and everywhere else. He was about to rise when somehow or other he was induced to push the bottom shelf. Why, he could not tell, but when he had done so, he found it give downwards. Yes, the whole cupboard went down. He pushed and pushed until the roof was no higher than the floor. Then indeed he saw a sight that caused him to feel a satisfaction. "Ah!" he exclaimed. "Ah! This is what I have sought, and I will have it. Gold! Gold! Aye, here is gold in heaps, more than I can carry." He stretched forth his arm and leaned into the cupboard, and then examined the contents, and felt assured that there were several thousands of pounds. The glittering heap before him was what he wanted, and for which he had remorselessly committed such fearful crimes. "But I must make haste, I must make haste. I shall lose what I have such a certainty of possessing." So muttering to himself, he put as much gold into his pockets as he could, and carrying a bag under his arm, he relocked the cupboard. Having retraced his steps below, he replaced everything, while at the same time he carefully examined his person to see that there were no traces of his deeds upon him, and then, wrapping himself up in his cloak, he left the house and proceeded towards his hotel. End of chapter 150. Recording by Sandra Estenson.
Chapter 151 of Varney the Vampire, Volume 3. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jessie. Varney the Vampire, Volume 3 by Thomas Peckett PREST. Chapter 151. The scene at the hotel. The relation of the cause of Sir Francis Varney's paleness. When Sir Francis Varney reached his hotel, he hurried to his own apartment, and then he called for his luggage. And when that was brought to him and he was alone, he unlocked a portmanteau and placed his gold in it. And then, having taken care to dress himself, he again met the Frasers below at their evening meal. "I have been strolling the streets for an odd hour," he said, "and find things pretty much as they used to be. I don't see many alterations worth speaking of." "And yet they say they are improving daily." "They may be, but only in parts and places, and it does not alter the general plan of the place, though appearances may be benefited." "Exactly. That, I dare say, may be the case, as indeed it is most likely to be the fact, especially when we see that, save in the case of entire new streets, all improvements are effected by individual exertions." "Exactly, but life and happiness is the result of individual exertions," said Sir Francis. "But yet many shrink from prosecuting a scheme of happiness, lest barriers be placed in their path that would be as injurious to all as they are effectual." "Indeed, that is often the case." "I have met with many instances of blighted devotion since I have wandered about over the green vales of England." "I dare say you have met with some adventures?" "I have, sir. I have met with many that, perhaps, few men would have ventured into and ever expect to come out alive. But I have not done so without paying dearly for my temerity." "Indeed? Have you incurred much danger?" "I have, sir." "But still, it must be pleasant to fall back upon the remembrances of the past, and recall scenes and events that possess interest to your mind." "It is so. I remember well that, some years ago when I was in the north, that an occurrence took place that has left a lasting memorial upon me, and one I can never forget as long as I live." "It must have been a serious affair." "It was a serious affair, a very serious affair. I was going to Scotland when, by some accident, the carriage in which I was travelling broke down and it was unable to proceed, and I took up my abode at the nearest inn, where I determined to remain until the carriage was repaired, which would, it was said, take a couple of days at the least. Well, in the evening of the first day, I walked about visiting the different places where I could hope for any pleasure. In doing so, I was wandering slowly down a lane when I heard voices on before me. The wind blew from them to me, and I heard all they said. "Then this evening," said one. "Yes, yes, I consider this the most favorable opportunity that can be taken advantage of." "Well, then we had better go at once." "Yes, now we are on our road there, you see, and we shall be soon there. There will be just light enough to reconnoiter." "Very well. We can secret ourselves somewhere about the place where we shall not be discovered, and then we can get into the house at our leisure." "But we may have to meet with opposition." "Then we must resist too. You don't intend to be taken, I suppose?" "No, not I." "What did you intend to do if you were caught?" "Fight my way out. Or, if need be, I can push my knife into the ribs of anyone who may be in my way." "Right. I shall be inclined to do for anyone who wants to keep me against my will. You may reckon upon that for a certainty. And if the old man but as much as moves or utters a single cry, I will do for him." "You don't mean that, do you?" "I do, and will do it." "Then I know, and I will do the same. I like to have a pal that will stick by me and have no nonsense. However, we need not be in a hurry and just do what is necessary. Go to work steadily and determinedly." "Agreed. We will now go on. Strike off to the left here, and we come then to the house. There's only one manservant, but he can be dealt with. And as for the old man himself, he cannot do much." Then they both proceeded across the fields until they came to some thick wood, where I lost sight of them. Well, I knew the house they were both going to, and I determined to proceed by another route to the same place. I followed the lane as far as it would go, and found it led up to the very house which I had heard the men declare their intention of robbing and possibly of murdering the owners. The inhabitants, I must say, for master or servant alike they would not hesitate in destroying. I entered the house. The door was open, after having walked up a broad and stately avenue of linden trees which lined the way up to the hall door. I was for some moments unable to make anyone hear, but soon after I heard someone approaching the hall. I paused, therefore, and presently there came an elderly gentleman, with a grave but pleasant countenance, upon whose shoulders fell a profusion of snow-white locks. He was venerable yet pleasing in the expression of countenance. He bowed when he saw me, but looked rather surprised. "I dare say, sir, you appear surprised at my intrusion, but I do not come without a motive." "I dare say not, sir, but you are welcome. Will you walk in?" "Thank you," I said, "but I have come to put you on your guard against an attempt at robbery and possibly murder that is to be made upon your house to-night." "Indeed, sir? I can hardly believe anyone would be so wicked as to do anything of the kind. And yet, I am sure you would not say so if you had not some grounds for such a belief." "I have," I replied, "and I will relate them." I then related to him distinctly all that I had overheard in the lane, and the direction the man had taken. He appeared very thoughtful for some moments, and then he said to me, as he led the way upstairs, "Will you walk upstairs with me?" I did as he desired, and followed him upstairs until he came to a small observatory erected in the top part of the house. "You say you saw them enter the copse between here and the lane yonder?" "Yes, I did, and I imagine they may be seen if watch is kept in such a place as this, for I am sure they intend to examine the house as to the means of approaching it, and they expect to find only yourself and a manservant." "They would have met but little more indeed. However, I am forewarned, and I will take care to be forearmed. That is my object in coming to you. To effect this is all I seek. And now I will bid you good evening, for I have got some distance to walk before I can get back to the hotel where I am staying." "Are you staying at a hotel?" "Yes," I replied, and I named the place where I was stopping, when he said, "You are welcome, if you are pleased to do so, to remain here. I shall be most happy with your company." "Thank you," I said, "and frankly I must say I should like to see the issue of this affair, and will accept of your invitation. Though, perhaps, I have accepted of your invitation too readily." "Not at all, not at all. You are heartily welcome. We will sit up and wait for these fellows. When we have beaten them off, we can retire in security to rest without fear of disturbance." "Do you see them?" I inquired as he was looking through a telescope towards the point I had named. "No, I do not see them yet," he said. "No, no, and yet I think I see something now through a portion of the copse. It's difficult to tell what they are about. If they go much further in that direction, they will be plain enough. There they are! I can see them both plainly enough." "Two of them?" said I. "Yes," he replied, "I see two. They appear to be looking this way." "What are they doing now?" "Oh, I see. They are making for a place of concealment nearer the house." "Well, sir, I am much obliged to you, very much indeed, for you have evidently saved my house from being robbed and myself from murder. I owe you my life." "Nay, sir, not so bad as that. The villains might not have been successful enough to have effected an entrance before you were alarmed." "And if they had, what could I have done?" "Why, truly, I have firearms, but I should have been loath to have used them, and my hesitating might have cost me my life. So I have to thank you for life and property." "As you please," I said, "but what steps do you intend to take towards your own and your property's preservation?" "I shall obtain the aid of another, and quietly await their coming. But as I think from their appearance they are not mere country people who come about robbing from distress, but men who make a kind of profession of housebreaking, I will have both taken and dealt with according to law." "It is their deserts," I said, "for a more deliberately planned affair I never yet heard of. And what makes it so very black is the fact of their early making up their minds to murder anyone." "No doubt," he replied, "but that is an inducement to take them in the fact. I will send for one man, and what with ourselves we can secure the villains. We are enough to do that." "They are desperate," I said. "But they will yield to numbers," he said. No doubt, but there must be a yet greater number. The odds, in my opinion, are not great enough to secure victory. These are desperate men, for they will not be taken, and 2 to 1 will not deter them. 1 or even 2 lives may be sacrificed before they are secured, if they do not get off. Well, then, you appear to think that we had better obtain more aid? I do, I replied. At least a couple of men, if not 3, over the number you first spoke of, if you wish it to be perfectly harmless in its results. I should so desire it, he replied. Then you'll find that requisite, I answered. Then I was invited downstairs, and great hospitality shown me by the old gentleman, who was an exceedingly pleasant companion. He was well informed and a well-read man, and was the only inhabitant of that large mansion. He had been many years a widower, and had but 1 child, a son, a young man of great promise. He was abroad on a tour, and he was awaiting his return with great anxiety, as he was somewhat longer than he had anticipated. We sat conversing for some hours. We had a handsome supper, and afterwards some choice wine, and then in came 3 stout countrymen. My friends, he said, I want you to keep watch and ward tonight in my house, to protect it from robbers. They agreed to do so, but expressed some surprise at what had occurred, and appeared to believe it hardly possible that any one could have been wicked enough to compass such an object. However, he told them all I had said, and they were sent below, where they were served with a very good supper and promised reward, with injunctions not to speak after a certain hour. This all arranged, I and my host seated before a fire, and with some wine we passed the time agreeably enough. The time passes, said my host as the clock chimed the hours. I wonder if anybody is about now. I should think, I replied, they must be about thinking of what they have in contemplation. I am sure it is a quiet hour in this part of the world, and I should imagine that no human being can be awake about here. None, I dare say, save ourselves and our assailants, if they have not altered their minds and given up their intentions, or altered the night they intended for the attempt. Who can tell? They may have done so. I hope not. No, it will be very uncomfortable to be in constant dread, never knowing any night I lay down what I may come to before morning. I may lose my life and never again see my son. Yes, I replied, but had we better not put out the lights? I will order it to be done. As he spoke, he rang a bell, and when a servant appeared, he said to him, William, you had better put out all lights, and be quite silent. And if you hear any noise, get out of the way and remain silent, unless they try to get away and elude us. Very well, sir. And as soon as you hear them at work, you had better steal up and let me know, as I intend to be present when they are taken into custody, as I have a particular desire to see it done. Very well, sir, but you don't know the danger you run. These men are desperate men, and they care not what they do. I know all that, William, but hasten down and see my orders executed. Very well, sir, said the servant, who had once left the room. These people, said my host, are not willing that I should run any risk. Perhaps they think they will not have so indulgent a master in the next. Perhaps they are right, for I give but little trouble, and my servants are mostly out visiting some of their relatives. Indeed, I thought you were somewhat slenderly attended. I am. I have 2 very ill away at this moment, and I have another away on a visit to some relative. Indeed, they have an easy life under you. It is much the same as not having them at all, and yet I must say I have nothing to complain of. My wishes are complied with, and I have all my work done well and punctually to a minute. And if they have extra work to do, they never complain, but set about it cheerfully. At that moment we heard William creeping up the stairs, and my thoughts soon reverted from the contemplation of the calm contentment in which all here appeared to dwell, to the confusion and bustle that was now likely to ensue. "Hilloa, William!" "Yes, sir, they are come," said William in a low voice. "Where are they getting in at?" "In at the pantry window, sir. I can hear them unbolting the shutters. They have cut a hole out of it, and they will be clear in another minute." "Very good. Now do you all keep together, and at the appointed signal rush upon them and bind them hand and foot." "It shall be done, sir, as soon as they get into the kitchen." "Very well. I will come down and watch the operations. But don't let them get back again." "Oh, we'll take care of that." "Make haste," he said, "and station some of them under the stairs, so that they cannot escape. They must both be taken." "And they shall." "Go on. Will you come down with me?" he said, turning to me. "Or will you remain here till we have secured them? You, sir, are a stranger, and perhaps you had better remain here." "No, not I," said I. "I will go down with you by all means, and we will see how these fellows behave themselves under these circumstances. Let me see them. I was the first to discover them, and I hope you will not refuse me permission to be present at a denouement which I have in some measure been instrumental in bringing about. I wish to be present." "Then follow me," said my host. "We shall not be too soon, for several minutes have elapsed." I waited not a moment, but hurried downstairs, and found that as I was going down the kitchen stairs, the robbers were well aware of the fact that they were entrapped, and in their rage they fought with desperation, and forced their way out of the kitchen and through the barrier placed below. And seeing they would effect an escape, I jumped over the rails and stood between them and the way out. I had but my sword, and I drew that and placed myself in a position, threatening destruction to the first who should attempt to pass. This, however, was disregarded, and the 2 men rushed at me, hoping to bear me down, but my weapon ran through the first, when a pistol bullet laid me low, and the man rushed over me. "Good heavens! And were you shot, Sir Francis?" "Oh, yes, and was severely injured, and it was some months before I was cured, the bullet having wounded an artery." "That was dangerous." "Yes, so much so that 2 surgeons declared that, had I bled another half second, I must have been dead. That I must, in fact, have bled to death, and I should never have recovered, for I had, they thought, scarcely half an ounce of blood in my whole body, scarcely sufficient to cause the heart to beat." "It was a fearful state. Where did you remain?" "I remained at this gentleman's house the whole of the time. He was very liberal and very generous. I wanted for nothing. He said that but for the immediate attention of the surgeons, he thought I must have bled to death. He saw me fall, and one of the men, without waiting for orders to do so, ran for a surgeon, and hence the rapidity with which the medical man was in attendance. And what was worse, I had in about 2 months afterwards to undergo an operation to have the bullet extracted." "Good heavens! You had a severe time of it?" I had, and I had nearly lost my life a second time, for I lost a vast quantity of blood again. And ever since that, I have been of the extraordinary pale complexion which you now see. I thought it was natural, said Mrs. Fraser suddenly, but a look from Mr. Fraser told her she had done wrong. No, ma'am, it is not, indeed, natural. It was not until the loss of blood occasioned it, I presume? No, Captain, it was not. It resulted partly from the dreadful loss of the vital fluid which I sustained, and partly from a most violent, virulent typhus which I took in consequence of my looseness of system. That, I believe, did more than anything else towards bringing me to my present position. For before, I was considered fair and florid in complexion, but my friends hardly knew me or professed they did not, and I have not seen them from that day to this. Upon my word, Sir Francis Varney, you have had some extraordinary occurrences in your life. I am amazed at them. Indeed, I could scarcely believe one person, especially a gentleman of your property and standing. Why, as for that, I can only say that my position and rank here have given me the means to enable me to go through them without inconvenience, for I have no home or place dedicated to domestic delights. Such a life I should be proud and happy to possess, but which I can never accomplish. Indeed, I may say I fear to make the attempt. But no matter. The prime of life will, in a few years, pass away, and then I shall be past the desire for a home. And yet Varney Hall in the north is an ancient palace-like abode that would grace a duchess. Is that your ancestral hall? It is, said Varney with emotion. And now uninhabited? Oh dear, no. When I determined to lead the life I do, I could not permit the old place to become ruinous and deserted, and therefore lent it, and those who now live there are well able and willing to keep the place in repair. That is fortunate. Well, sir, I hardly know what is fortunate or unfortunate as regards myself, but I have one of my old fits of melancholy come over me. Nay, you must battle against them, Sir Francis. I have ever endeavored to do so, but I don't know how it is. I cannot, somehow or other, bear up. I feel a terrible depression of spirits. I am truly sorry to hear it, but let us hope that the gaieties of Bath will restore you to your wonted serenity. I am sure I wish it, said Mrs. Fraser. But where are we to go tomorrow? Can you tell me that, Sir Francis? To the pump room in the morning, the library and the assembly in the evening, if you are inclined to do all at once. Yes. Well, then, suppose we make the attempt. We can but give in if we find it too much exertion, though I am inclined to believe we shall not find it beyond our strength, said Mrs. Fraser. Then that is our agreement, said Sir Francis. Yes, it is. End of chapter 151.